Section 21 of Amusement Only. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Carolin. Amusement Only by Richard Marsh. His First Experiment. Chapter 1. The Lady. Last winter, George Pownceby spent some weeks at the Empire Hotel. One morning he was coming along the corridor leading from the smoking room, where he met Mrs. Pratt. The lady stopped. "What is that you have in your hand?" she asked. Mr. Pownceby had in his hand a slim pamphlet in a green paper cover. He held it up. "I've got it." "No." "Yes." "Oh, I say!" These remarks are not given here as examples of English conversation, but with a view of presenting the reader with an accurate report of what was spoken. There was a pause. Then the lady said, with great solemnity, "You don't mean to say that it has actually come?" "I do." Mr. Pownceby held out the slim pamphlet at arm's length in front of him. He pointed at it with the index finger of his other hand. "How to Hypnotize. A Practical Treatise. Hints to Amateurs. With full instructions for marvellous experiments. Price 7d. Post free. 8 stamps." "Oh, Mr. Pownceby, I'm so sorry." "Sorry, Mrs. Pratt? Why, it was at your instigation I plunged to the extent of those 8 stamps." "But you don't understand. My husband's coming. I have to meet him at the station at 12:32. Mr. Pownceby stroked his moustache. There was not much, but he was fond of stroking what there was of it. Mrs. Pratt's husband had been rather a joke. People who winter in hotels are, as a rule, quite prepared to be epigrammatic at the expense of a pretty unmarried woman whose husband is not in evidence. And Mrs. Pratt's husband had not been in evidence as yet. "I don't quite follow you." Mr. Pownceby spoke with a little malice. "Whence your sorrow? Because your husband is coming by the 12:32?" "Don't you see? I want to be the first to be experimented on. I've been waiting for that book 2 days, and now it just comes when I can't stay. Don't you think there's time? Come into my sitting room." They went into her sitting room. When they were there, the lady again assailed the gentleman with the inquiry, "Don't you think there's time?" "It depends. I think you're going too fast. To commence with, I've been looking through the thing in the smoking room, and I believe it's a swindle." "A swindle? Oh, don't say that." "It's nothing but a hash of old mesmeric tricks I've seen performed at country fairs." "But doesn't it tell you how to do them?" "It pretends to. It gives some ridiculous directions, but I don't believe they can be done that way." "Try, do, on me." Mr. Pownceby laughed. Mrs. Pratt amused him, and not for the first time either. "To begin with, we have to sit face to face and stare at each other for 10 minutes or a quarter of an hour. Come along, let's begin." The lady brought forward a couple of chairs, and they sat down on them, face to face, and very close together. Opening the pamphlet, Mr. Pownceby searched for further instructions. "You're not staring at me," remarked the lady. "Half a minute, I'm looking for what comes next." "What does it say? Read it aloud." "After I've stared at you long enough—" It doesn't sound civil, does it? Never mind the civility. Go on. "After I've stared at you long enough, you begin to feel queer. Then—" Mr. Pownceby read from the pamphlet. "Place the thumb of your left hand on the subject's forehead. You're the subject, just above the nose, and level with the eyebrows." Mrs. Pratt placed her pretty little hand above her pretty little nose to point out the exact spot denoted. Mr. Pownceby read on. "This is the locality of the phrenological organ of individuality." "Is it?" said Mrs. Pratt in an awestruck whisper. The reader continued. "Rest the ends of your fingers on the top of the subject's head. At the same time take hold of the left hand with your right hand, applying the inside part of your thumb to the middle of the palm of the hand. I'm punctuating this," interpolated Mr. Pownceby, "as I go on. The man who printed it seems to have had a fount of type containing no other stops but commas. The object of this is for the operator to get into contact with two very important nerves that pass on the palm of the hand, which are called ulnar and median nerves. I don't know if that's true or what it means, but it says so here. With your left hand, still keep the thumb on the forehead between the eyes, and the fingers resting on the subject's head, which must be inclined slightly back. Say, 'Look into my eyes,' after gazing in his eyes intently for a few seconds. Say in a loud, clear, firm tone of voice, 'Close your eyes quite tight.' Let him remain a few seconds like this, and the trick is done. There's a lot more nonsense to follow, but when you've remained for a few seconds like that you're supposed to be mesmerized or hypnotized or whatever they call the thing." "Really? It sounds quite simple." "It does, simple folly." "Hush! You shouldn't speak like that. Perhaps if you don't believe, you mayn't succeed." "It says something to that effect in these previous pages." "Then try to believe. Let us begin." They began. The lady was preternaturally solemn, but the gentleman was tortured by a desire to smile. He felt that the lady might resent his laughter. Under these circumstances, the 10 minutes' stare was trying. Mrs. Pratt had sweet blue eyes, which were large and round, the sort of eyes which the average man would not object to stare at for 10 minutes or even longer. As the appointed space of time drew to a conclusion, even Mr. Pownceby became reconciled to his lot. He placed his left thumb on the lady's forehead above her nose. "Is that level with my eyebrows?" she inquired. He reproved her. "I don't think you ought to speak. You destroy the connection." Mrs. Pratt was dumb. Mr. Pownceby proceeded in accordance with the directions contained in the pamphlet. He rested the tips of his fingers on the top of the lady's head. He took hold of her left hand with his right. He applied the inside part of his thumb to the centre of her palm. He said to her, "Look into my eyes." She looked into his eyes, her head inclined a little backwards. This part of the proceedings was, so far as the gentleman was concerned, on the whole agreeable. He gazed fixedly into her pretty eyes. Then he added in a loud, clear, firm tone of voice, "Close your eyes quite tight." She closed her eyes. There was a pause for a few seconds. Remembering the instructions contained in the pamphlet, he proceeded another step. "You cannot open your eyes," he said. "Your eyes are fast, quite fast." The pamphlet had it, "Should the subject be very sensitive, he will be unable to open them." Apparently the subject, though in this case feminine, was very sensitive. At least Mrs. Pratt kept her eyes shut fast. Mr. Pownceby was a little startled. He removed his touch from her brow and released her hand. "Mrs. Pratt, are you hypnotized already?" Mrs. Pratt was silent. "Mrs. Pratt, you don't mean you're really hypnotized?" Still silence. He leaned forward and stared at the lady, not in the same way he had done before, but quite as fixedly. "By Jove, I believe she is." He got up from the chair. He glanced at the pamphlet. He wanted to know how to reverse the process, how to bring the lady to again. "This is a pretty state of things. The thing is not such a swindle as I thought it was. But it's all nonsense. She can't be magnetized or mesmerized or hypnotized or whatever it is. If she is, the thing is as easy as winking. If I'd only known it, I'd have been mesmerizing people since the days of childhood. Mrs. Pratt!" But Mrs. Pratt was silent. If she was not hypnotized, then she was in some condition which was equally curious. She sat back in her chair, with her face turned up to the ceiling, in a state of the most complete quiescence. Something in her appearance struck Mr. Pownceby as even unpleasantly odd. He recommenced searching down the pages of the green-covered pamphlet for the reversal process. It was beautifully simple. In order to release him, the pamphlet said, throughout the writer had taken it for granted that the subject would be masculine, blow a sharp, cold wind from your mouth on his eyes, and say with authority, "Now you can open them." Repeat if necessary. It is important to recollect that a cold wind blown from the operator destroys the effect and demagnetizes. One could not but suspect that some subjects might not like this, but its simplicity was charming. If that was all that was necessary, then so far as Mr. Pownceby was concerned, the whole science of hypnotism was already mastered. He approached Mrs. Pratt. He bent over her, devoutly hoping that no one might enter the room as he engaged in doing so. Quite a shock went through him as he advanced his face towards hers. The expression of her countenance was so very much like death. He blew a cold wind on her eyes, those pretty blue eyes whose cerulean hue he had veiled. "Now you can open them." The words were spoken with as much authority as he could muster in the then agitated state of his mind, but Mrs. Pratt did not open them. The pamphlet said, "Repeat if necessary." Mr. Pownceby repeated. He blew, and he blew. He blew the cold wind all out of him, so that the beads of perspiration stood upon his brow, but still the subject gave no signs. Mrs. Pratt, I say, Mrs. Pratt, for heaven's sake, do look at me." All signs of authority had gone from him now. But wind and voice alike were ineffectual. Apparently it was easier to hypnotize than to do the other thing. In his trouble, Mr. Pownceby told himself that the writer of that pamphlet was, well, untrustworthy. Or else something had gone wrong in the working. But what could it be? He looked at his watch. 12:30. I shall have her husband here directly. I imagine that he will make some observations if he finds his wife like this. Such a contingency was only to be expected. When a man, after long absence from his wife, returns to find a stranger experimenting on her, and she in a hypnotic condition from which the stranger cannot release her, his first feelings toward that stranger are not, in civilized countries, invariably friendly. Mr. Pownceby, when he had blown the cold wind all out of him, arrived at a resolution. "I will tell Doris. I must get her to help me. It is quite certain that, whatever happens, I mustn't let that man come and find me alone with his wife." It was only the dread of such a catastrophe that brought him to the sticking point of this resolution. Miss Hasseltine, christened Doris, was Mr. Pounceby's betrothed. She was also wintering in the hotel with her mamma. Mr. Pownceby was aware, even painfully aware, that the young lady's feelings towards Mrs. Pratt were not of the warmest possible kind. He was equally conscious that her impression was that his feelings were, if anything, too warm. He would rather anything had happened almost, than that he should have been reduced to the necessity of acquainting Miss Hasseltine with the situation he was in. But it was certainly impossible for him to allow the returning husband to come in and find him there, alone with his wife, and she apparently in a chronic hypnotic condition. So he went in search of the young lady. Of course he found her where he would have least wished to find her, in the drawing-room with the ladies. He had to call her out, and at first she wouldn't come. But as it would have been impossible for him to tell his tale in the presence of a dozen sharp-eared and sharp-tongued women, he protested that there was something of the utmost importance which he must say to her alone. "Well, what is it?" she asked, directly he had got her outside the door. He perceived that she was not in one of her sentimental moods. Perhaps something in his manner had roused her suspicions. "Mrs. Pratt has fainted." "Indeed? What has that to do with me? Let her faint. She looks to me as though she were that sort of person who could faint at pleasure." "Doris, for goodness' sake hear me out. I want your help. It's through me she's fainted." "Pray, what do you mean?" "It's this confounded thing." Mr. Pownceby held out the slim, green-covered pamphlet. "You know I told you I'd written for that pamphlet, 'How to Hypnotise.' Well, the thing came this morning. Here it is. I've been experimenting on her, and I've not only hypnotised her, but, by George, I can't get her round again." "A pretty state of things, upon my word." "Don't pitch into me now, Doris, don't. There she is in her sitting room in a fit or something. I don't know what's the matter with her, and her husband's coming this morning." "He is coming at last, is he?" "I expect him every moment. He's due at 12:32. "She seems to have told you all about it." "She told me so much, at any rate. I know I've been an ass, I can see that now, but lend me a hand first and let me have it afterwards. I was obliged to come to you. I couldn't let him find me alone with her in such a state as that. Come and see what you can do for her, there's a darling, do. After all, it's for me, you know, not her." Miss Hasseltine yielded so far as to advance with him along the corridor. There was a fresh arrival when they reached the hall, a gentleman. He was speaking to the young lady who acted as a bookkeeper through the office window. "My name is Pratt, Juliet J. Pratt. I believe my wife is staying here." Mr. Pownceby clutched Miss Hasseltine's arm. "It's he," he whispered. "There is a Mrs. Pratt staying here," replied the bookkeeper. "Her sitting room is number 13." The new arrival was about to be ushered into number 13 when Mr. Pownceby interposed. He hurried across the hall and touched him on the shoulder. "Excuse me, may I speak to you? My name is Pownceby." The new arrival turned and faced him. As he did so, Mr. Pownceby perceived, a little dimly perhaps, what sort of a man he was. He was of medium height, slightly built, about 40 years of age, very dark, with a clean-shaven face and a pair of keen black eyes, which looked at Mr. Pownceby as though they meant to pierce him. "Delighted to hear you speak, or any man, even if his name is not Pownceby." Directly the words were spoken, Mr. Pownceby became conscious that this new arrival was an American. "I believe you are Mr. Pratt, Mrs. Pratt's husband." "I am. Worse luck." She intended to meet you at 12:32." "She did she? That's her all through, as she is to be. She never did get farther than intentions. It's about 2 years since I saw her, and I don't see her now. Have you a message to deliver? Does she desire that I should go away for another 2 years? If so, I'm willing." As this was said out loud, without the slightest attempt at concealment, so that every word was audible, not only to Mr. Pownceby, to whom the remarks were addressed, but also to Miss Hasseltine, and the bookkeeper, and the porter, and the boots, and the waiter, and the chambermaid, and any other straggler who might happen to be within 50 yards or so, it would seem that in her husband Mrs. Pratt possessed a man of character. But Mr. Pownceby was not fond of such publicity. "Can I say a word to you alone?" "No, sir, you cannot. If you have a message from my wife, say it. If not, lead on to number 13." "The fact is, Mr. Pratt—Mrs. Pratt is not—quite well." "Is that so? I'm glad to hear it. It's a comfort to know that only sickness would keep her from her husband, though it wouldn't need much of that to keep her from a chance of seeing me." "The fact is, I wish, Mr. Pratt, you would let me speak to you alone." "No, sir, I will not. If she is dead, don't spare my feelings. If she has left me for a better man, don't spare my feelings either." "The fact is, she's in a hypnotic state." "In what a state?" "A hypnotic state." "What state is that?" "Hypnotic's a new word. It's been brought in lately. It means mesmeric." Mr. Pratt paused before replying. He looked Mr. Pownceby up and down. "Look here, Mr. I think you mentioned Pownceby. I don't know who you are, but you seem a friendly kind of man. Take my advice and get something off your chest. I see you've got it on." Mr. Pownceby smiled rather faintly. He did not lack presence of mind as a rule, though just then the situation was as much as he could manage. He made a dash at it. "I wish you would give me half a minute alone. Since you will not, I must try to tell my story where we are. You see this book?" Mr. Pownceby held up the fatal treatise. "It contains instructions for the performance of mesmeric experiments. Mrs. Pratt insisted on my performing one of them on her. I succeeded in producing the mesmeric state, but I couldn't get her out of it." There was a curious twinkle in Mr. Pratt's eyes. "I don't catch on," he said. "I say that I hypnotized her, that is, produced the mesmeric state, but that I couldn't get her out of it." "Well?" "She's in it now." "In what?" "The mesmeric state." "Does she seem to like it?" "That is more than I can say. I had just induced Miss Haseltine to come to my assistance when we were so fortunate as to encounter you." "Then I am to understand that when she ought to have been at the depot looking out for me, she was engaged in looking out for the mesmeric state along with you. Is that so?" "I'm afraid it is." "Where is she?" "In her sitting room, number 13." "Lead on to number 13." The procession started. The waiter went first, Mr. Pratt next, and after him Miss Haseltine and Mr. Pownceby. Miss Haseltine's demeanour was severe. Either her severity or something else seemed to weigh upon her lover, who did not appear to be altogether at his ease. They reached number 13. The waiter knocked. There was no reply. He knocked again. Still no reply. Mr. Pratt turned towards Mr. Pownceby. "I guess she's still in that state of yours. I think we'll all go in." He turned the handle of the door and entered. "I guess she's quitted." The room was empty. End of chapter 1 of his first experiment. Section 22 of Amusement Only. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Carolin. Amusement Only by Richard Marsh. His First Experiment, Chapter 2, and the Gentleman. It was undoubtedly the case, unless they were to suppose that she had hidden under the sofa or behind the curtains. Mr. Pownceby looked about him, conscious of a slight feeling of bewilderment. There were the two chairs exactly as he had left them, but the one which Mrs. Pratt had occupied was vacant. "It's very odd," he murmured. "How?" "She was certainly unconscious when I left her." Perhaps the knowledge that she was failing in her duty as a wife came to her in that mesmeric state, came to her so strongly that she started off to the depot just then and there to look for me. If she's at the depot now, in the state you say she was, I guess she'll soon be popular." "Don't you think I'd better go and look for her?" "I do not. If she's gone, she's gone, and if she comes back again, she comes, but I'm not the man to put my friends out for a trifle. My friend, if you will allow me to call you so, give me your hand." Before Mr. Pownceby was quite aware of it, Mr. Pratt had possession of his hand. "I thank you. You have placed me under an obligation to you this day. But it may be that I shall cry you even yet. Let's liquor. Perhaps the young lady will pull in?" Miss Haseltine, however, making some inaudible remark having reference to her mamma, vanished out of sight. Mr. Pratt was not at all abashed. He addressed the waiters. "Champagne, a large bottle, and a bucket of ice." Mr. Pownceby protested. "You are very kind, but I don't drink at this hour of the day, and only so—" Mr. Pratt cut him short. "Fetch the drink." The waiter fled. If, after performing those pleasing experiments on the wife, you refuse to drink with the husband, I shall take it quite unkindly. But don't you think some inquiries ought to be made for Mrs. Pratt? I do not. What I do think is that I ought to cultivate your friendship now that I have the chance. A man who knows the wife so well should know something of the husband too. The drink came. Mr. Pratt saw 2 bumpers filled. Mr. Pownceby, who was an abstemious man, had a difficulty in escaping being compelled to drain his draught. "Bring another bottle when I ring," said Mr. Pratt as the waiter left the room. The 2 gentlemen were left alone. Mr. Pownceby still did not feel quite easy in his mind. Champagne generally disagreed with him at any time, always in the morning. He had some glimmerings of an idea that, if he refused to drink, Mr. Pratt would seek in his refusal an occasion to quarrel. He had heard and read of some curious customs in the States, how, for instance, to refuse under certain circumstances to drink with a citizen of the great Republic was to place on him an insult which could only be wiped out by blood in which 6-shooters played a part. He half suspected that Mr. Pratt was a citizen like that. Certainly he was unlike any American he had ever seen. His indifference to his wife's fate was almost brutal. Mr. Pownceby felt this, but he also felt that it was impossible for him to insist on making inquiries if the husband declined to sanction them. Nor was his uneasiness lessened by Mr. Pratt's appearance of entire ease. That gentleman leaned back in his chair, the one his wife had occupied, his summer coat unbuttoned, his hat tilted on to the back of his head. "So you hypnotized my wife?" Mr. Pownceby smiled faintly. The subject was beginning to be unpleasant. "Hypnotize me." Mr. Pownceby started. "I suppose you're joking?" "Why? My wife had an inquiring mind. Why shouldn't I have too? Perhaps you prefer trying those sort of experiments on wives rather than on their husbands." Mr. Pownceby was not quite sure if this remark was intended disagreeably. It made him wince. "Perhaps you think I've been trying these experiments all my life. Until this pamphlet was brought in by this morning's post, I knew no more about hypnotism than you do. My first experiment was tried, at her own urgent request, upon your wife." "I take after her. I am fond of experiments too. That book must be a treasure. Oblige me with a glance at it." Mr. Pownceby handed it to him. Mr. Pratt began reading at the end. "There's a nice little bit as a finish." Mr. Pratt read it aloud. "In conclusion, I would earnestly ask all my readers to remember that this valuable science should not be abused, especially in the case of females, and that, in all cases, when making experiments, they should have friends or other persons present. That's sound advice. Did you notice it?" I think it caught my eye." Mr. Pownceby seemed a little fidgety. Mr. Pratt turned to the beginning. "I see it mentions that the subject is to stare at the operator, and the operator is to stare at the subject for about 10 minutes or a quarter of an hour. Did you work the thing like that?" "I followed, to the best of my ability, the instructions contained in the pamphlet." "Did you stare at my wife?" "It sounds uncivil, but I'm afraid I did." "For 10 minutes or a quarter of an hour?" "About that." "And did my wife stare at you?" Mr. Pownceby laughed. He was conscious that Mr. Pratt's line of examination was tending to place him in a false position. "I perceive you've marked this work with your pencil where it says, 'Place the thumb of your left hand on the subject's forehead, just above the nose and level with the eyebrows.' Did you place the thumb of your left hand on my wife's forehead just above the nose, level with the eyebrows?" "Certainly, Mr. Pratt. I can only say that, with the view of making a little experiment, I followed to the best of my ability the instructions generally." "You seem to have seen the thing well through. It says that you've next to rest the ends of your fingers on the top of the subject's head. Did you rest the ends of your fingers on the top of my wife's head?" You may take it for granted that I did whatever the book directs." "May I? That's kind. You increase my sense of obligation. Then you're to say to the subject, 'Look into my eyes.' Did you ask my wife to look into your eyes?" "I did, certainly." "Certainly, of course. You're thorough, like the book. The man who put this book together had seen it done before. Then you're to say, 'Close your eyes quite tight.' Did you tell my wife to close her eyes quite tight?" "I did. It was at that point that she went off into the hypnotic state." "Was it now? That is really interesting. And what did you do next?" "I tried to bring her to." "Now hark at that! And after all that trouble you had taken to send her off. And did she come?" "I'm sorry to say, as I have already explained to you, that my efforts were not attended with success." "That was mean of her, real mean. And I suppose that, when you were performing these little experiments of yours upon my wife, this room was filled with a large assemblage?" "We were alone together. I wish now it had been otherwise." "Why?" "After the questions you have already put to me, that needs no answer." "Think not? Well, let me fill up your glass for you, Mr. Pownceby." "I am obliged to you, but must beg you to excuse me." "Is that so? You don't show yourself so friendly towards me as towards my wife. Perhaps, Mr. Pownceby, you're not aware that for the last 2 years I've been trotting round the world, picking up the pieces to throw into her lap. She's English and I'm American. She's not at all times fond of me, and we sometimes differ. But I love her in my way. So you may think that when the first thing I hear when I come to catch a sight of her after a 2 years' parting is this little tale of yours, I find it a pleasing tale entirely. I find it that, I do assure you. Now the only thing I should like you to do would be to play those little tricks on me which you played upon my wife. I should like to be hypnotized uncommonly." "If I were to attempt to do so, I don't think that I should succeed. But in any case, after my experience of this morning, it will be a long time before I make any more experiments on anyone." "Is that so? Think it over, Mr. Pownceby, while I lock this door and slip the key into my pocket." Mr. Pratt locked the door and slipped, as he called it, the key into his pocket. "Mr. Pratt, I insist upon your unlocking that door." "Mr. Pownceby, I was raised out west, and I was raised fighting, and I learned to smell a fight when it was coming, and there's as big a fight now coming as ever I yet smelled." "Why do you use this language, sir, to me?" "It's my ignorance, maybe, but in those parts where I was raised, when one man played upon another man's wife the tricks you've played on mine, it generally ended up in fighting. You bet it's going to end in fighting now." Mr. Pownceby made a movement towards the bell. Mr. Pratt sprang in front of him. "You can ring the bell, sir, afterwards, but first you listen to me. They'll have to break the door down to get into this room, and that'll be a scandal. And while they're breaking it down I'll be whipping you. You'd better take it fighting. I've got a shooter." Putting his hand to his pistol pocket, Mr. Pratt flashed the barrel of a revolver in Mr. Pounceby's face. "But I know your English notions, and I don't want to use it in a little affair like this. Let's strip to the waist and clear the furniture out of the middle of the room, and have a little prize fight all to ourselves." "Do you take me for a madman, Mr. Pratt? If you don't immediately unlock the door I shall summon assistance, and if you use any violence towards me I shall give you into the charge of the police." "Is that your line? That's mine." Dropping the hand which held the revolver, Mr. Pratt delivered with his left, delivered so neatly in the centre of Mr. Pounceby's forehead that gentleman was hurled backwards on to the floor. "If you like you can take it lying down, and you can summon assistance while you are taking it, but you'll take it somehow, that you bet." Mr. Pownceby, lying on the floor, looked up at Mr. Pratt standing over him. "Let me get up." He got up. The blow had cut the skin and the blood was trickling through. With his handkerchief he staunched the flow. "In America, Mr. Pratt, they may think the sort of thing you propose heroic. In England they consider a row of any sort ridiculous." "Consider! It isn't what they consider I'm thinking of, it's how you're going to take it." Mr. Pownceby fixed his glance upon Mr. Pratt's keen black eyes. He smiled. "Take it? I'll take it fighting, like the converter of Colonel Quagg." "I thought you would. I smelt it coming on." As he spoke, Mr. Pratt placed his revolver on the mantelshelf. Mr. Pownceby was still smiling. "Do you propose to settle it now?" "I do. I propose to settle it before you leave this room." "In that case, don't you think we'd better pull the blind down, or people walking on the terrace will be able to see the fun? If we are going to make asses of ourselves, we may as well do it as far as possible in private." Mr. Pratt pulled the blind down. The sun was shining outside. The room was still quite light. "I guess," said Mr. Pratt, "we had better clear the furniture out of the middle of the room." Mr. Pownceby assisted him in doing so, what little there was to clear. The bottle of champagne and the 2 glasses they placed with the revolver on the mantelshelf. They then proceeded to strip. As they were doing so, Mr. Pownceby asked a question. "How shall we manage about time?" "We will call time when we feel we want it. You understand this is not only a fight, it's a whipping. I'm whipping you." Mr. Pownceby smiled as he answered, "I understand exactly." When they were in position there was not much, so far as appearance went, for a lover of the fancy to choose between the two. Now that they were peeled, both seemed thoroughly fit, as fit almost as though they had been trained. Mr. Pownceby was fair, Mr. Pratt was dark. That was about the only difference. Both would have turned the scale at something near 11 stone, and both measured something under 5'8". Nor did it take long to show that both could use their hands. There was none of that waiting for each other which so often tries the patience of the spectators round a ring. Mr. Pratt came at once to business, with perhaps rather too much self-confidence. He was apparently under the impression that it was going to be a case of whipping his opponent from the first, which was the reason, doubtless, that Mr. Pownceby succeeded in returning the compliment which had been paid himself, and landing Mr. Pratt upon his back. That gentleman seemed surprised. "I say," he asked, lying where he had fallen, "what's this?" Mr. Pownceby replied politely, "I hope I haven't hurt you." "You haven't hurt me much. You've surprised me more. I reckon we'll continue." The proceedings recommenced, but this time Mr. Pratt had changed his tactics. Instead of coming up with the apparent intention of wiping his opponent off the face of the earth with a single blow, he played his game more cautiously. He fenced, but becoming tired of this and feeling possibly that the whipping was not proceeding fast enough, he led off with his right and followed with his left, and Mr. Pownceby countered and returned with such effect that for half a minute Mr. Pratt was dancing about, while Mr. Pownceby was performing on him in the fashion which the regimental drummer beats to quarters on his drum. "Time!" he cried. The round was over. A pause ensued during which his feelings were plainly too deep for words. "Have you ever had a whipping before?" he asked. Mr. Pownceby smiled. It was evident that his smile was a smile of enjoyment at last. "1 or 2, he said. "Like this?" "Not exactly. In England we don't, as a rule, indulge in this form of amusement in the private sitting-room of a hotel." "Don't you? Well, it's as well. I smelt that a big fight was coming, and it's come. I'm going to enjoy myself entirely. You've closed up one of my eyes, I should say, from the feel of it, forever. You've broken the bridge of my nose. What there'll be to pay for the blood upon the carpet, there's a card gone from me already, is more than I quite care to think. Before I've finished whipping you, I reckon I'll be slain. Come, Mr. Pratt, don't you think this foolish business had better cease? If you require an apology, I am willing to tender one in any form you like. What passed between your wife and myself was simply in the nature of a little scientific experiment." "It'll be in the nature of a little scientific experiment what's going to pass between us, too. I'm fond of experiments as well as you. Time!" Mr. Pratt fell into position. He struck at Mr. Pownceby. Mr. Pownceby laughed as he warded off the blow. "Come, Mr. Pratt, why will you persist in this absurdity?" "I'm going to whip you, sir." "In that case you really must excuse me for putting on the steam. If a waiter or someone were to come and find me engaged like this, I should never hear the last of it as long as I lived. Here goes." It went. He had been warding off Mr. Pratt's blows while he was speaking. When he ceased, the battle really joined. Mr. Pratt's guards were nowhere. In spite of all that he could do to save himself, his antagonist proceeded to administer severe punishment in thoroughly workmanlike style. The blows rang out upon his head and body. Mr. Pownceby wound up with one under the chin, which lifted him off his feet and laid him on his back. He lay where he fell. The blow had knocked him senseless. Mr. Pownceby proceeded to revive him with the remains of the champagne. "This," he murmured, opening his eyes and looking up, "is nice." Mr. Pownceby propped him up upon a chair. "You compelled me to rush the thing, but I hope I haven't hurt you much." "Well," said Mr. Pratt, "you haven't killed me, quite. I never enjoyed whipping a man so much before. Say, stranger, is this the first little fight you've had?" "I've sparred for the amateur championship, and I won it twice. I'm going in for it again next week." "You might have mentioned that before the game began." "If the inherent absurdity of your proposal could not deter you, I doubt if any information I might have imparted would have been of much avail." "There's something in that. Time!" Mr. Pratt rose from his chair. He stood on his feet, rather doubtfully. "What do you mean?" asked Mr. Pownceby. "I'm going on whipping you." "Look here, Mr. Pratt, each time you stand up I shall simply knock you down again. Of course you can go on with that sort of thing as long as you like." "That is so, I can, and that's a sort of thing of which one doesn't care to get more than enough." Mr. Pratt rested his hand on the back of a chair. It seemed as though, without some support of that kind, he could not stand. Mr. Pownceby advanced to him. "Mr. Pratt, give me your hand." Mr. Pratt gave it to him. It would seem mechanically. The two men stood looking at each other in silence, the one almost without a scratch, the other a battered ruin. While they were so engaged the latch of the French window was opened from without, the blind was thrust aside and a lady entered. It was Mrs. Pratt. When she saw what met her eyes she stared, which as a breach of good manners was, under the circumstances, excusable. "Mr. Pownceby! Gilead! What have you been doing?" "I've been whipping him," said Mr. Pratt. "I must be off my ordinary, for I never whipped a man that way before." Mr. Pownceby slipped on his jacket. He helped Mr. Pratt to put on his. "It's my fault, Mrs. Pratt. When I told your husband of our little experiment, and that I had found myself unable to release you from the hypnotic state which I had induced, he thought I must have done you a serious injury, and that he naturally resented." Mrs. Pratt looked at Mr. Pownceby. There was a twinkle of intelligence in her sweet blue eyes. "I see. Miss Haseltine is looking for you. You'll find her in the drawing-room." "Thank you," said Mr. Pownceby. I'll go and look for her." As he sneaked out of the room with his shirt and waistcoat under his arm, devoutly hoping that no one might encounter him on his journey to his own apartment, he heard Mrs. Pratt make this remark to her husband, the first after 2 years' absence. "So, Gilead, you've been at it again." He heard Mr. Pratt reply, "I have. I've been raised fighting, and I reckon that fighting I shall die. If I have to whip that Pownceby again, it is a certainty I shall." End of chapter 2 of his first experiment.
Section 23 of Amusement Only. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Stephen Kinford. Amusement Only by Richard Marsh. An Old-Fashioned Christmas, Chapter 1. The Promise. An Old-Fashioned Christmas. A lively family will accept a gentleman as paying guest to join them in spending an old-fashioned Christmas in the heart of the country. That was the advertisement. It had its points. I was not sure what, in this case, an old-fashioned Christmas might happen to mean. I imagine there were several kinds of old-fashioned Christmases, but it could hardly be worse than a chop in my chambers, or horror of horrors at the club, or my cousin Lucy's notion of what she calls the festive season. Festive? Yes. She and her husband, who suffers from melancholy and all the other complaints which flesh is heir to, and I, dragging through what I call patent medicine dinner, and talking of everybody who is dead and gone, or else going, and of nothing else. So I wrote to the advertiser. The reply was written in a sprawling feminine hand. It was a little vague. It appeared that the terms would be 5 guineas, but there was no mention of the length of time which that fee would cover. I might arrive, it seemed, on Christmas Eve, but there was no hint as to when I was to go, if ever. The whole thing was a trifle odd. There was nothing said about the sort of accommodation which would be provided, nothing about the kind of establishment which was maintained, or the table which was kept. No references were offered or asked for. It was merely stated that we're a very lively family, and that if you're lively yourself, you'll get on uncommonly well. The letter was signed Madge Wilson. Now, it is a remarkable thing that I have always had an extraordinary predilection for the name Madge. I do not know why. I have never known a Madge, and yet, from my boyhood upward, I have desired to meet one. Here was an opportunity offered. She was apparently the careworn mother of a lively family. Under such circumstances, she was hardly likely to be lively herself, but her name was Madge, and it was the accident of her Christian name which decided me to go. I had no illusions. No doubt the 5 guineas were badly wanted. Even a lively family would be hardly likely to advertise for a perfect stranger to spend Christmas with them if they were not. I did not expect a princely entertainment. Still, I felt that it could hardly be worse than a chop or Cousin Lucy. The subjects of her conversation I never cared about when they were alive, and I certainly do not want to talk about them now they are dead. As for the pills and drops with which her husband doses himself between the courses, it makes me ill even to think of them. On Christmas Eve the weather was abominable. All night it had been blowing and raining. In the morning it began to freeze. By the time the streets were like so many skating rinks, it commenced to snow, and it kept on snowing. That turned out to be quite a record in the way of snowstorms. Hardly the sort of weather to start for an unknown destination in the heart of the country. But at the last moment I did not like to back out. I said I would go, and I meant to go. I had been idiot enough to load myself with a lot of Christmas presents, without the faintest notion why. I had not given a Christmas present for years. There had been no one to give them to. Lucy cannot bear such trifling, and her husband's only notion of a present at any time was a gallon jar of somebody's stomach stirrer. I am no dealer in poisons. I knew nothing of the people I was going to. The youngest member of the family might be 20, or the oldest 10. No doubt the things I bought would be laughed at. Probably I should never venture to offer them. Still, if you have not tried your hand at that kind of thing for ever so long, the mere act of purchasing is a pleasure, that is a fact. I had never enjoyed shopping so much since I was a boy. I felt quite lively myself as I mingled with the Christmas crowd, looking for things which might not turn out to be absolutely preposterous. I even bought something for Madge. I mean Mrs. Wilson, of course. I knew that I had no right to do anything of the kind, and was aware that the chances were 100 to 1 against my ever presuming to hint at its existence. I was actually ass enough to buy something for her husband. 2 things, indeed, alternatives, as it were, a box of cigars, if he turned out to be a smoker, and a case of whiskey if he didn't. I hoped to goodness that he would not prove to be a hypochondriac, like Lucy's husband. I would not give him pills. What the lively family would think of a perfect stranger arriving burdened with rubbish, as if he had known them all their lives, I did not dare to think. No doubt they would set him down as a lunatic right away. It was a horrible journey. The trains were late, and, of course, overcrowded. There was enough luggage in our compartment to have filled it, and still there was one more passenger than there ought to have been. An ill-conditioned old fellow who wanted my hat-box put into the van because it happened to tumble off the rack onto his head. I pointed out to him that the rack was specially constructed for light luggage, that a hat-box was light luggage, and that if the train jolted, he ought to blame the company, not me. He was impervious to reason. His wrangling and jangling so upset me that I went past the station at which I ought to have changed. Then I had to wait 3/4 of an hour for a train to take me back again, only to find that I had missed the one I intended to catch. So I had to cool my heels for 2 hours and a half in a wretched cowshed amidst a bitter whirling snowstorm. It is some satisfaction for me to be able to reflect that I made it warm for the officials, however cold I might have been myself. When the train did start, some 40 minutes after scheduled time, it jolted along in a laborious fashion at the rate of about 6 miles an hour, stopping at every roadside hovel. I counted 7 in a distance, I am convinced, of less than 20 miles. When at last I reached Crofton, my journey's end, it turned out that the station staff consisted of a half-witted individual who was station master, porter, and clerk combined, and a hulking lad who did whatever else there was to do. No one had come to meet me. The village was about 1/2 mile, and Hanger Dean, the house for which my steps were bent, about 4 miles by the road. How far it was across plowed fields my informant did not mention. There was a trap at the Boy and Blunderbuss, but that required fetching. Finally, the hulking lad was dispatched. It took him some time, considering the distance was only about 1/2 mile. When the trap did appear, it looked to me uncommonly like an open spring cart. In it I was deposited, with my luggage. The snow was still descending in whirling clouds. Never shall I forget the drive in that miserable cart, through the storm in those pitch-black country lanes. We had been jogging along some time before the driver opened his mouth. "Be you going to stop with they Wilsons?" "I am." "Ah." There was something in the tone of his which whetted my curiosity. Near the end of my tether, though I was. "Why do you ask?" "It be about time as someone were to stay with them as were a bit capable like." I did not know what he meant. I did not ask. I was beyond it. I was chilled to the bone, wet, tired, hungry. I had long been wishing that an old-fashioned Christmas had been completely extinct before I had thought of adventuring in quest of one. Better Cousin Lucy's notion of the festive season. We passed through a gate, which I had to get down to open, along some sort of avenue. Suddenly the cart pulled up. "Here we be." That might be so. It was a pity he did not add where "here" was. There was a great shadow which possibly did duty for a house, but, if so, there was not a light in any of the windows, and there was nothing visible in the shape of a door. The whereabouts of this, however, the driver presently made clear. "There be the door in front of you. You go up 3 steps, if you can find 'em. There's a knocker, if none of 'em haven't twisted it off. If they have, there's a bell on your right, if it isn't broken." There appeared to be no knocker, though whether it had been twisted off was more than I could say. But there was a bell, which creaked with rust, though it was not broken. I heard it tinkle in the distance. No answer, though. I allowed a more than decent interval. "Better ring again," suggested the driver. "Hard. Maybe they're up to some of their games and wants rousing." Was there a chuckle in the fellow's voice? I rang again, and again, with all the force I could. The bell reverberated through what seemed like an empty house. "Is there no one in the place?" "They're there, right enough. Where's another thing? Maybe on the roof, or in the cellar. But if they know you're coming, perhaps they hear and don't choose to answer. Better ring again." I sounded another peal. Presently feet were heard advancing along the passage. Several pairs, it seemed, and a light gleamed through the window over the door. A voice inquired, "Who's there?" "Mr. Christopher from London." The information was greeted with what sounded uncommonly like a chorus of laughter. There was a rush of retreating feet, an expostulating voice, then darkness again, and silence. "Who lives here? Are the people mad?" "Well, thereabouts." Once more I suspected the driver of a chuckle. My temper was rising. I had not come all that way and subjected myself to so much discomfort to be played tricks with. I tolled the bell again. After a few seconds' interval, the pit-pat of what was obviously one pair of feet came towards the door. Again a light gleamed through the pane. A key was turned, a chain unfastened, bolts withdrawn, It seemed as if someone had to drag a chair forward before one of these latter would be reached. After a vast amount of unfastening, the door was opened, and on the threshold there stood a girl, with a lighted candle in her hand. The storm rushed in. She put up her hand to shield the light from danger. "Can I see Mrs. Wilson? I'm expected. I'm Mr. Christopher from London." "Oh." That was all she said. I looked at her. She at me. The driver's voice came from the background. "I drove him over from the station, miss. There be a lot of luggage. He do say he's come to stay with you." "Is that you, Tidy? I'm afraid I can offer you nothing to drink. We've lost the key of the cellar, and there's nothing out except water, and I don't think you'd care for that." "I can't say rightly as how I should, miss. Next time will do. Be it all right?" The girl continued to regard me. "Perhaps you had better come inside." I think I had. I went inside. It was time. "Have you any luggage?" I admitted that I had. Perhaps it had better be brought in. Perhaps it had. "Do you think that you could manage, Tidy?" "The mare, she'll stand still enough. I should think I could, miss." End of Chapter 1 of An Old-Fashioned Christmas. Recording by Stephen Kinford, Sharon Township, Ohio. Section 24 of Amusement Only. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Stephen Kinford. Amusement Only by Richard Marsh. An Old-Fashioned Christmas, Chapter 2. And the Performance. By degrees my belongings were borne into the hall, hidden under an envelope of snow. The girls seemed surprised at their number. The driver was paid, the cart disappeared, the door was shut. The girl and I were alone together. "We didn't expect that you would come." "Not expect me, but it was all arranged. I wrote to say that I would come. Did you not receive my letter?" "We thought that you were joking." "Joking? Why should you imagine that?" "We were joking." "You were? Then I am to gather that I have been made the subject of a practical joke, and that I am an intruder here? Well, it's quite true that we did not think you were in earnest. You see, it's this way. We're alone." "Alone? Who are we?" "Well, it will take a good while to explain, and you look tired and cold." "I am both." "Perhaps you're hungry." "I am." "I don't know what you can have to eat unless it's tomorrow's dinner." "Tomorrow's dinner?" I stared. "Can I see Mrs. Wilson?" "Mrs. Wilson?" "That's Mama. She's dead." "I beg your pardon. Can I see your father?" "Oh, father's been dead for years." "Then to whom have I the pleasure of speaking?" "I'm Madge. I'm mother now." "You are mother now?" "The trouble will be about where you are to sleep, unless it's with the boys. The rooms are all anyhow, and I'm sure I don't know where the beds are." "I suppose there are servants in the house?" She shook her head. "No, the boys thought that they were nuisances, so we got rid of them. The last one went yesterday. She wouldn't do any work, so we thought she'd better go. Under those circumstances, I think it probable that you were right. Then am I to understand that there are children?" "Rather." As she spoke, there came a burst of laughter from the other end of the passage. I spun round. No one was in sight, she explained. "They're waiting round the corner. Perhaps we'd better have them here. You people, you'd better come and let me introduce you to Mr. Christopher." A procession began to appear from round the corner of boys and girls. In front was a girl of about 16. She advanced with outstretched hand and an air of self-possession which took me at a disadvantage. "I'm Bessie. I'm sorry we kept you waiting at the door, but the fact is that we thought it was Eliza's brother who had come to insult us again." "Pray don't mention it. I am glad that it was not Eliza's brother." "So am I. He is a dreadful man." I shook hands with the rest of them. There were 6 more, 4 boys and 2 girls. They formed a considerable congregation as they stood eyeing me with inquiring glances. Madge was the first to speak. "I wondered all along if he would take it as a joke or not, and you see he hasn't. I thought all the time that it was a risky thing to do." "I like that. You keep your thoughts to yourself, then. It was you proposed it." You said you'd been reading about something of the kind in a story, and you voted for our advertising ourselves for a lark." The speaker was the biggest boy, a good-looking youngster with sallow cheeks and shrewd black eyes. "But, Rupert, I never meant it to go so far as this." "How far did you mean it to go, then? It was your idea all through. You sent in the advertisement, you wrote the letters, and now he's here. If you didn't mean it, why didn't you stop his coming, Rupert?" The girl's cheeks were crimson. Bessie interposed. "The thing is that, as he is here, it's no good worrying about whose fault it is. We shall simply have to make the best of it." Then to me, "I suppose you really have come to stay?" I confess that I had some notion of the kind to spend an old-fashioned Christmas. At this there was laughter, chiefly from the boys. Rupert exclaimed, "A nice sort of old-fashioned Christmas. You'll find it will be. You'll be sorry you came before it's through." "I'm not sure of that." There appeared to be something in my tone which caused a touch of silence to descend upon the group. They regarded each other doubtfully, as if in my words a reproof was implied. Bessie was again the spokeswoman. "Of course, now that you have come, we mean to be nice to you, that is, as nice as we can, because the thing is that we are not in a condition to receive visitors. Do we look as if we were?" To be frank, they did not. Even Madge was a little unkempt, while the boys were in what I believe is the average state of the average boy. "And," murmured Madge, "where is Mr. Christopher to sleep?" "What is he to eat?" inquired Bessie. She glanced at my packages. "I suppose you have brought nothing with you?" "I'm afraid I haven't. I had hoped to have found something ready for me on my arrival." Again they peeped at each other as if ashamed. Madge repeated her former suggestion. "There's tomorrow's dinner." "Oh, hang it!" exclaimed Rupert. "It's not so bad as that. There's a ham, uncooked. You can cut a steak off, or whatever you call it, and have it broiled." A meal was got ready, in the preparation of which every member of the family took a hand, and a room was found for me, in which was a blazing fire and traces of recent feminine occupation. I suspected that Madge had yielded her own apartment as a shelter for the stranger. By the time I had washed and changed my clothes, the impromptu dinner, or supper, or whatever it was ready. A curious repast it proved to be, composed of oddly contrasted dishes, cooked and sometimes uncooked in original fashion, but hunger, that piquant sauce, gave it a relish of its own. At first, no one seemed disposed to join me. By degrees, however, one after another found a knife and fork, till all the 8 were seated with me round the board, eating, some of them as if for dear life. "The fact is," explained Rupert, "we're a rum lot. We hardly ever sit down together. We don't have regular meals. But whenever anyone feels peckish, he goes and gets what there is, and cooks it and eats it on his own." "It's not quite so bad as that," protested Madge, "though it's pretty bad." It did seem pretty bad, from the conventional point of view, from their conversation, which was candor itself. I gleaned details which threw light upon the peculiar position of affairs. It seemed that their father had been dead some 7 years. Their mother, who had been always delicate, had allowed them to run nearly wild since she died some 10 months back. They appeared to have run quite wild. The house, with some 600 acres of land, was theirs, and an income, as to whose exact amount no one seemed quite clear. "It's about 800 a year," said Rupert. "I don't think it's quite so much," doubted Madge. "I'm sure it's more," declared Bessie. "I believe we're being robbed." I thought it extremely probable. They must have had peculiar parents. Their father had left everything absolutely to their mother, and the mother, in her turn, everything in trust to Madge, to be shared equally among them all. Madge was an odd trustee. In her hands the household had become a republic, in which everyone did exactly as he or she pleased. The result was chaos. No one wanted to go to school, so no one went. The servants, finding themselves provided with 8 masters and mistresses, followed their example, and did as they liked. Consequently, after sundry battles royal, Lively episodes, some of them have evidently been. One after the other had been got rid of, until, now, not one remained. Plainly the house must be going to rack and ruin. "But have you no relations?" I inquired. Rupert answered, "We've got some cousins, or uncles, or something of the kind in Australia, where, so far as I'm concerned, I hope they'll stop." When I was in my room, which I feared was Madge's, I told myself that it was a queer establishment on which I had lighted. Yet I could not honestly affirm that I was sorry I had come. I had lived such an uneventful and such a solitary life, and had so often longed for someone in whom to take an interest, who would not talk medicine chest, that to be plunged, all at once, into the center of this troop of boys and girls with an accident which, if only because of its novelty, I found amusing. And then it was so odd that I should have come across a Madge at last. In the morning I was roused by noises, the cause of which, at first, I could not understand. By degrees the explanation dawned on me. The family was putting the house to rights. A somewhat noisy process, it seemed. Someone was singing, someone else was shouting, and 2 or 3 others were engaged in a heated argument. In such loud tones was it conducted that the gist of the matter traveled up to me. "How do you think I'm going to get this fire to burn if you beastly kids keep messing it about? It's no good banging at it with the poker till it's alight." The voice was unmistakably Rupert's. There was the sound of a scuffle, cries of indignation, then a girlish voice pouring oil upon the troubled waters. Presently there was a rattle and clatter, as if someone had fallen from the top of the house to the bottom. I rushed to my bedroom door. "What on earth has happened?" A small boy was outside. "Peter," he explained. "Oh, it's only the broom and dustpan gone tobogganing down the stairs. It's Bessie's fault. She shouldn't leave them on the landing." Bessie, appearing from a room opposite, disclaimed responsibility. "I told you to look out where you were going, but you never do. I'd only put them down for a second, while I went in to empty a jug of water on to Jack, who won't get out of bed, and there are all the boots for him to clean." Injured tones came through the open portal. "You wait, that's all. I'll soak your bed tonight. I'll drown it. I don't want to clean your dirty boots. I'm not a shoeblack." The breakfast was a failure. To begin with, it was inordinately late. It seemed that a bath was not obtainable. I had been promised some hot water, but as I waited and waited, none arrived. I proceeded to break the ice in my jug. It was a bitterly cold morning, nice, old-fashioned weather, and to wash in the half-frozen contents. As I am not accustomed to perform my ablutions in partially dissolved ice, I fear that the process did not improve my temper. It was past 11 when I got down, feeling not exactly in a Christmassy frame of mind. Everything and everyone seemed at 6s and 7s. It was after noon when breakfast appeared. The principal dish consisted of eggs and bacon, but as the bacon was fried to cinders and the eggs all broken, it was not so popular as it might have been. Madge was moved to melancholy. "Something will have to be done. We can't go on like this. We must have someone in to help us." Bessie was sarcastic. "You might give Eliza another trial. She told you, if you didn't like the way she burned the bacon, to burn it yourself, and as you followed her advice, she might be able to give you other useful hints on similar lines." Rupert indulged himself in the same vein. "Then there's Eliza's brother. He threatened to knock your bloomin' head off for saying Eliza was dishonest, just because she collared everything she laid her hands on. He might turn out a useful sort of creature to have about the place. It's all very well for you to laugh, but it's beyond a jest. I don't know how we're going to cook the dinner." "Can I be of any assistance?" I inquired. "First of all, what is there to cook?" It seemed there were a good many things to cook. A turkey, a goose, beef, plum pudding, mince pies, custard, sardines. It seemed that Molly, the third girl, as she phrased it, could live on sardines and esteem no dinner a decent dinner at which they did not appear, together with a list of et ceteras half as long as my arm. "One thing is clear, you can't cook all those things today. We can't cook anything." This was Rupert. He was tilting his chair back and had his face turned towards the ceiling. Why not? Because there's no coal. No coal? There's about a half a scuttle full of dust. If you can make it burn, you'll be clever. What Rupert said was correct. Madge confessed, with crimson cheeks, that she had meant, over and over again, to order some coal, but had continually forgotten it, until finally Christmas Day had found them with an empty cellar. There was plenty of wood, but it was not so dry as it might have been, and anyhow, the grate was not constructed to burn wood. You might try smoked beef, suggested Rupert. When that wood goes at all, it smokes like 1 o'clock. If you hung the beef up over it, it would be smoked enough for anyone by the time that it was done. I began to rub my chin. Considering the breakfast we had had, from my point of view, the situation commenced, for the first time, to look really grave. I wondered if it would not be possible to take the whole 8 somewhere where something really edible could be got. But when I broached the subject, I learned that the thing could not be done. The nearest hostelry was the Boy and Blunderbuss, and it was certain that nothing edible could be had there, even if accommodation could be found for us at all. Nothing in the shape of a possible house of public entertainment was to be found closer than the market town 8 miles off. It was unlikely that even there a Christmas dinner for 9 could be provided at a moment's notice. Evidently, the only thing to do was to make the best of things. When the meeting broke up, Madge came and said a few words to me alone. I really think you had better not stay. Does that mean that you had rather I went? No, not exactly that. Then nearly that? No, not a bit that. Only you must see for yourself how awfully uncomfortable you'll be here. And what a horrid house this is. My dear Madge. Everybody called her Madge, so I did. Even if I wanted to go, which I don't, and I would remind you that you contracted to give me an old-fashioned Christmas, I don't see where there is that I could go. Of course there's that. I don't see either, so I suppose you'll have to stay. But I hope you won't think that I meant you to come to a place like this. Really, you know. I'm sorry, I had hoped you had. That's not what I mean. I mean that if I had thought that you were coming, I would have seen that things were different. How different? I assure you that things as they are have a charm of their own. That's what you say. You don't suppose that I'm so silly as to not know you're laughing at me. But as I was the whole cause of your coming, I hope you won't hate the others because of me. She marched off, brushing back, with an impatient gesture, some rebellious locks which had strayed upon her forehead. That Christmas dinner was a success, positively. Of a kind? Let that be clearly understood. I am not inferring that it was a success from the point of view of a chef de cuisine. Not at all. How could it be? Quite the other way. By dint of ransacking all the rooms and emptying all the scuttles, we collected a certain amount of coal, with which, after adding a fair proportion of wood, we managed, not brilliantly, but after a fashion. I can only say personally, I had not enjoyed myself so much for years. I really felt as if I were young again. I am not sure that I am not younger than I thought I was. I must look the matter up. And after all, even if one be, say, 40, one need not be absolutely an ancient. Madge herself said that I had been like a right hand to her. She did not know what she would have done without me. Looking back, I cannot but think that if we had attempted to prepare fewer dishes, something might have been properly cooked. It was a mistake to stuff the turkey with sage and onions, but as Bessie did not discover that she had been manipulating the wrong bird until the process of stuffing had been completed, it was felt that it might be just as well to let it rest. Unfortunately, it turned out that some thyme, parsley, mint, and other things had got mixed with the sage, which gave the creature quite a peculiar flavor. But as it came to table nearly raw and tough as hickory, it really did not matter. My experience of that day teaches me that it is not easy to roast a large goose on a small oil stove. The dropping fat caused the flame to give out a strong-smelling and most unpleasant smoke. Rupert, who had charge of the operation, affirmed that it would be all right in the end, but by the time the thing was served, it was as black as my hat. Rupert said that it was merely brown, but the brown was of a sooty hue, and it reeked of paraffin. We had to have it deposited in the ash bin. I dare say that the beef would not have been bad if someone had occasionally turned it, and if the fire would have burned clear. As it was charred on one side and raw on the other, and smoked all over. The way in which the odor and taste of smoke permeated everything was amazing. The plum pudding came to the table in the form of soup, and the mince pies were nauseous. Something had got into the crust, or mincemeat, or something, which there, at any rate, was out of place. Luckily, we came upon a tin of corned beef in a cupboard, and with the aid of some bread and cheese, and other odds and ends, we made a sort of picnic. Incredible though it may seem, I enjoyed it. If there was anywhere a merrier party than we were, I should like to know where it was to be found. It must have been a merry one. When I produced the presents in which a happy inspiration had urged me to invest, the enthusiasm reached a climax. I believe that it is the proper form of words which I ought to use. As I watched the pleasure of those youngsters, I felt as if I were myself a boy again. That was my first introduction to a lively family. They came up to the description they had given of themselves. I speak from knowledge, for they have been my acquaintances now some time. More than acquaintances, friends, the dearest friends I have. At their request, I took their affairs in hand, Madge informally passing her trusteeship on to me. Things are very different with them now. The house is spick and span. There's an excellent staff of servants. Hanger Dean is as comfortable a home as there is in England. I have spent many a happy Christmas under its hospitable roof since then. The boys are out in the world, after passing with honor through school and college. The girls are going out into the world also. Bessie is actually married. Madge is married too. She is Mrs. Christopher. That is the part of it all which I find is hardest to understand, to have told myself my whole life long that the name of my ideal woman would be Madge, and to have won that woman for my own at last. That is greater fortune than falls to the lot of most men. I thought that I was beyond that kind of thing, that I was too old, but Madge seemed to think that I was young enough, and she thinks so still. And now there is a little Madge, who is big enough to play havoc with the sheets of paper on which I have been scribbling, to whom one day this tale will have to be told. End of Chapter 2 of An Old-Fashioned Christmas. Recording by Stephen Kinford, Sharon Township, Ohio.
Section 25 of Amusement Only. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Pascal Ramsier. By Deputy. A Reminiscence of Travel. Chapter 1. Despoiled. It would seem, Greenall, as if you couldn't even shoot. It would seem like it, wouldn't it? As I sauntered back to the hotel, I was conscious of a slight feeling of exacerbation. As if I had been got at. Had. No man likes to feel he is a laughing-stock. I felt that I had been made a laughing-stock just then. That, indeed, the process of manufacture had been going on ever since I showed my face in Ahmednugger. The men I had met were nice enough, in their way. Indeed, they were almost too nice, also in their way. They appeared to have so little to do, in the way of actual work, that they had made it the business of their lives to perfect themselves in what are usually regarded, say, as accomplishments. I was and am a plain civilian. I have worked for and earned my little pile, such as it is, and until I set out upon the pleasure tour in the East, it had never occurred to me that a man could be regarded as an uneducated idiot if he could not, say, run into double figures every time he took up his cue at billiards. The suspicion that a man might be so regarded had been dawning upon me ever since I arrived in India. But until I came to Ahmednugger, I never quite realized how shockingly my education had been neglected on exactly those points on which it ought to have been most carefully attended to. The men of Ahmednugger were the most sporting individuals I had ever yet encountered. Possibly I have not moved much among the congregations of sporting men, but I certainly have seen something of men of business. These men of Ahmednugger were not only the keenest sportsmen I had yet encountered, they were the keenest men of business too. And talk of the rigor of a competitive examination! They formed themselves into an examining board, which very soon took the stiffening out of me. They insisted on putting me through my paces before I had been a week in the place. They examined me in every game of cards which has been invented, and found me wanting in them all. They examined me as a rider, as a driver, as a shootist, as a cueist, in fact, in a range of subjects which I will not even venture to enumerate. They refused me one solitary pass. They plucked me in them all. It did not add to my sense of satisfaction that I found my ignorance expensive. The joke of the thing was, that before I came to India I had rather fancied myself as an amateur sportsman. I flattered myself that I had decent seat in a saddle, whether across country or on the flat. I thought that I made a tolerable fourth at whist, that I had some notion at any rate of English billiards, and of a hazard off the red. I certainly was under the impression that I could see with tolerable accuracy along the barrel of a gun. But these vain delusions were scattered, at once and forever, by the men of Ahmednugger. My all-around, purblind, insensate ignorance had been so convincingly displayed that, as I have said, I was the laughing-stock of the place. My latest performance in the exhibition line had been in match with young Tebb, the youngest and the latest joined of the subalterns. Young Tebb had lured me on to skittles. Mr. Tebb, who would have been more correctly designated as Master Tebb, was an awkward hobbledehoy, who, at any other place than Ahmednugger, I should have looked down upon with the most supreme contempt. When he challenged me to see who could smash most glass balls with a rifle bullet, I rashly took his challenge up. I flattered myself that at last I had a soft thing on. I had myself been found a soft thing so many times that I looked forward to a little change. I had no notion, it was rather late at night when the challenge was thrown down and taken up, how difficult it really was to hit a glass ball with a rifle bullet. I had never fired at a glass ball, nor had I ever seen anyone else do so. But I conceived that at any rate young Tebb would find at least as much difficulty in the thing as I should. We were each to fire at 50 glass balls, which were to be sent up into the air out of a trap. We were, of course, to fire at them while they were in the air. Out of the 50 I smashed one. Out of his 50, young Tebb smashed 49. It was the most mirth-provoking exhibition that was ever seen. Of course, the young scoundrel had been doing nothing else but fire at glass balls his whole life long. It was when I handed over the 200 rupees which I had staked and lost, that Mr. Tebb made his remark to the effect that I couldn't even shoot. When I returned to the hotel, a man was standing in the doorway. He addressed me as I came up the steps. "It strikes me that you and I might shake hands, sir." I asked him what he meant. "I've made myself one kind of ass, and you've made yourself another kind. We'd be a pair of beauties." I did not like being addressed in this manner, especially by a stranger, and especially by a stranger like this stranger. He was a short, undersized man with a vacuous expression of countenance. His attire suggested seediness. Perceiving that I did not appreciate his manner, he explained. "No offense intended, sir, but I just now saw you playing pantaloon to that youngster's clown, and I thought that he made the end of the poker rather hot. As for me, I'm an ass all over. My name's Johns. I came to this place to shear the sheep. There's been some shearing, but it's the sheep that's done it. They've about sheared me. I happen to have a trifle of money, so I came to these parts to see if I could do a bit of bookmaking. I've done a bit. The gentlemen in these parts have also done a bit. They've got a hold of pretty well every blessed mag I had. I did not encourage Mr. Johns. Quite the contrary. I had heard of him before. The regimental races had recently been held. A bookmaker had appeared upon the scene. Mr. Johns. Nearly every man in the place had bets with him, and to nearly every man in the place he had lost his money. With a vengeance had the Philistine been spoiled. End of chapter 1.
Section 26 of Amusement Only. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Peter John Keeble. Amusement Only by Richard Marsh. By Deputy. A Reminiscence of Travel. Chapter 2. The Game. Later in the day, on which I had shot off that match with Mr. Tebb, I encountered Mr. Johns again. I was in the billiard room of what was called the Club. As regards membership, it was very free and easy. Club indeed. A local celebrity was taking the floor. The room was tolerably full. On one of the side seats was Mr. Johns. The local celebrity was a Mr. Colson. Mr. Colson was stud groom to the Rajah of Ahmednagar. He was also, and at the same time, one of the most obnoxious persons I have in the course of my career had the pleasure of meeting. There never was such a loud-voiced braggart. It set one's nerves on edge to hear him. To listen to him, there was nothing he could not do. The misfortune was that some of the things which he said he could do, and do well. I had found that out to my cost soon after my arrival in Ahmednagar, and in consequence he had sat on me heavily ever since. He was a horrible man. That evening Mr. Colson was holding forth in his usual style on the subject of billiards. I should mention that at the period of which I am writing, Mr. John Roberts, the famous player, was on a tour in India. "I saw John Roberts at Calcutta," observed Mr. Colson, "and he saw me. He also saw me play. When he saw me play, he said he doubted if he could give me 15 in 100. I told him that I should like to see him do it, but he wouldn't take it on." "Is that so?" asked Mr. Johns. "That is so. I should like to see him give me 10 in 100. Either John Roberts or any man now living. I should like to have a game with you, Mr. Colson." "You would?" Mr. Colson looked at Mr. Johns. He looked him up and down. Mr. Colson was large and florid. Mr. Johns was small and underfed. Mr. Colson was, at least, expensively attired. About Mr. Johns' costume there was certainly no suspicion of expense. "I don't mind having you 100 up, my lad. How many shall I give you?" "I'm no player, Mr. Colson, but I'd like to play you even, if only for the sake of saying that I had the cheek to do it." "You shall have that pleasure. And how much would you like to have on, if only for the sake of saying that you had the cheek to have it on?" And Mr. Colson winked at the company in general. "Well, Mr. Colson, you and the other gentleman have won all my money, but I dare say I might manage 10 rupees. Put 'em up, my lad. Here's my 10. We'll play for the 20. They played for the 20, and, to my satisfaction, and I believe to the satisfaction of most of the others who were in the room, it was Mr. Johns who won. I am bound to say that it seemed to me to be rather a fluky win. Mr. Colson, whose disgust was amusing, had no doubt whatever about the fluke. Never saw anything like it, never. The balls never broke for me, not once. As for you, why, you did nothing else but fluke. Do you think so? I'll play you again, double or quits, and I'll give you 10 in the 100, Mr. Colson. Mr. Colson seemed amazed. In fact, I have no doubt he was amazed. I like your modesty. You'll give me 10. Here's my 20. I'll take you on. Mr. Colson took him on, and by way of fair exchange, Mr. Johns took him off. That is to say, he took off the stakes and the game. He did it rather neatly, just running in as Mr. Colson looked like winning. Mr. Colson was adjectival. Never saw anything like it. Never. In all my born days, never saw anything like my something luck. And as for your fluking, why, it just beats anything. Think so? I'll play you again, Mr. Colson, and again double or quits, and this time I'll give you 20 in a 100. You'll give me 20 in a 100? You will? Come on. That'll be 40 rupees a side. Here's mine, McB. Put me on 20, and we'll see what I can do. We did see what he could do. We also saw that Mr. Johns seemed able to do a little better. Once more he won the game. I am sure that we were all enjoying ourselves very much more than we had any reason to anticipate. As for Mr. Colson, he went purple. He showered on Mr. Johns a volley of that language which I had found pretty fashionable at Ahmednagar. Mr. Johns listened to him in silence while he pocketed the spoils. Then he had his say. You say I fluke. Why, my dear sir, you've no idea what a fluke is. You've no idea of any sort about billiards. You can no more play billiards than you can play the gentleman. You can't. You're the sort of person who it is just as well, once in a way, to expose. You're a humbug, Mr. Colson. You're a humbug. As for John Roberts, doubting if he could give you 15 in a 100, why, he could give you 99 in a 100 and beat you single-handed. I tell you what I will do, Mr. Colson. I will play you 500 up for 500 rupees a side. I will give you 400 start, and I will lay 2 to 1 against you with any gentleman who cares to back you. I don't think that's an unfair offer, Mr. Colson. It struck me as at any rate a rash offer. Mr. Colson was not such a tyro as Mr. Johns made out. He had made mincemeat of me, I do know that. Yet the offer did not seem to be made in any spirit of braggadocio. I fancy that the quiet, matter-of-fact manner in which it was made impressed Mr. Colson more than he altogether cared to own. My impression is that if he had his own way, he would have changed the subject. But the odds offered him were such, and the challenge was made in such a public manner, that he probably felt that if he wished to preserve a rag of reputation, now or never was the time to show the stuff that he was made of. Anyhow, the offer was accepted, and the terms of the match were definitely arranged before the parties left the room. End of Chapter 2 of By Deputy. Recording by Peter John Keeble, Nottingham, United Kingdom. Section 27 of Amusement Only. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Peter John Keeble. Amusement Only by Richard Marsh. By Deputy, A Reminiscence of Travel. Chapter 3, The Coalition. As I was retiring to rest, someone tapped at my bedroom door. In response to my invitation to enter, Mr. Johns came in. Without any preamble, he plunged at once into the purport of his presence in my chamber at that hour of the night, or rather morning. "I have come, Mr. Greenall, to ask you to lend me 500 rupees. I turned, looked at him. He met my glance without showing any signs of discomposure. "You have come to what?" He repeated his remark, quite as though it were a matter of course. "To ask if you will lend me 500 rupees. I don't know if you are in earnest, Mr. Johns. If you are, I would remark, first, that I am not a money lender, and second, that you are a complete stranger to me. I want the money to stake in my match with Mr. Colson." "Indeed, is that so? Then that is an added reason why I should decline to lend it to you. In my opinion, Mr. Johns, your chances of success in that match are, to say the least of it, remote. Look here, Mr. Greenall, I'm the last man in the world to wish to make myself offensive, but if we can understand each other, I think that you and I might do each other a good turn. I know all about how you've been treated by the fellows here. I know how they've all been taking pot shots at you. From what I hear, they've made you look like the biggest all-round muff that ever left his mammy. I dare say it's cost you something too." I did not altogether appreciate this gentleman's free and easy style of conversation, but to a certain extent I, so to speak, dissembled. "I do not know what warrant you have, Mr. Johns, for your remarks, and in any case I fail to see what business it is of yours." "It's this way, if you like. You can be even with all the lot of them, and more than even." "How? By lending you 500 rupees, and letting you have, as you put it, a pop shot at me with the rest of them. Thank you, Mr. Johns. By the way, I fancy I've heard of some person or persons taking pop shots at you. I think I did hear that you came here to make a fortune. Did you make it, Mr. Johns?" "No, I didn't, hang 'em. Like you, I owe them one, and I mean to pay them, with compound interest. And if you like to say the word, I'll pay them that little lot you owe them too. Look here, Mr. Greenall, I don't mind owning that a keener lot of gentlemen than the gentlemen here I don't think I've ever had to do with. I won't say they robbed me, but they certainly cut me up into very nice little pieces, and they handed me around. I've seldom seen anything of the kind which was better done. But never mind, my turn's coming. I'm not fond of bragging, quite the other way. If it wasn't that I was in a hole, I wouldn't say a word. But it is the simple truth that all the things at which these fellows think they're dabsters, I'm as far ahead of them as they're ahead of you. No offence intended. You can take my word for it that I know what I'm talking about. It doesn't follow, because just once in a way they happen to muck up my book, that I'm flat. As for being able to give Colson 400 out of 500 at billiards, if I choose, and I shall choose, he's simply bound to lose. I don't mean to say that I'm a John Roberts, because I'm not, but I do know how to play, and that in a sense which Colson hasn't even begun to understand. I've heard that Mr. Colson hasn't behaved over well to you. I thought you'd like to see him taken down a peg or two." I should have liked to have seen more than one of them taken down a peg or two, though I said nothing of that to Mr. Johns. "How came you to match yourself, Mr. Johns, when you were aware that you were not in possession of the required stakes?" "I took it for granted that I should get the stakes from you." Mr. Johns was frank, at any rate. "From me? What claim do you suppose yourself have on me?" "No claim. But you see, sir, they've had me, and they've had you. They've had both of us, in fact, pretty smartly, and I thought you might like to be even with some of them, by deputy." By deputy. If it was workable, that was not a bad idea. I felt that I should like to be even with some of them, beginning, say, with Mr. Colson. How that man had squelched me beneath his elephantine foot, the brute, even as it were, by deputy. What guarantee have I that you will not lose my money, as you have already lost your own? If we get up early, we shall have the billiard room all to ourselves. If you like, I will give you some idea of what I can do upon a billiard table." We did get up early. We did have the billiard room all to ourselves, and Mr. Johns did give me some idea of what he could do upon a billiard table. For one thing, he got on the spot, and he stopped there. He continued to put the red down without once missing until the marker appeared. When the marker did appear, we thought that perhaps the proceedings had better cease. If I can trust my memory, before the proceedings ceased, Mr. Johns had put the red down something like 200 times in succession. I thought that was good enough, even for Mr. Colson. I agreed to advance the necessary number of rupees. The match came off. It was a beautiful match. The room was crowded to overflowing. Mr. Johns had managed to back himself into a very fair amount. Even I, in my small way, had managed to back him too. But there was not so much readiness shown to support the local champion as I had expected. They were keen, were the men of Ahmednugger. I fancied that already they had begun to smell a rat. And not only so, they were always willing to make a bet. But on that particular occasion they were almost equally willing to see Mr. Colson come to grief. I think that, in those parts, Mr. Colson was not so popular as he deserved to be. I verily believe that there were some who objected to him almost as much as I did. Poor Mr. Colson! He was painfully nervous. His nervousness prevented his showing even his usual form. He had made 15 when Mr. Johns, getting on the spot, stayed there. He ran out without once putting down his cue. Nothing like it had ever been seen before in Ahmednugger. When the marker notified the fact that Mr. Johns had completed his 5th 100, Mr. Colson was for a moment speechless. He seemed unable to realize that the thing was so. It's a something swindle." "Beg your pardon, Mr. Colson, it's a what?" Mr. Colson's tone was loud and threatening. Mr. Johns' tone was quiet and almost indifferent. Yet Mr. Colson did not seem to altogether like it. He began to bluster. "You did not tell me that you were a professional." "No, I did not tell you that I was a professional." "You didn't play the other night as you have played to-day. It looks to me uncommonly like a put-up thing." "It looks to you like a put-up thing, does it, Mr. Colson? Well, I'll give you a chance of showing your professional side. I believe you can drive." "Drive?" Mr. Colson looked at the little man as if he would like to eat him. "I'm the finest whip in India." "Indeed, is that so? Well, I'll drive you either 4 or 8 in hand for 1,000 rupees a side, although you are the finest whip in India." Mr. Colson snapped at his offer before it was fairly out of his mouth, and I felt that Mr. Johns was going a little too far. It was one thing to match him at billiards, another thing to match him at driving. There Mr. Colson was on his native heath. When I was alone with Mr. Johns, I told him so. "I don't know if you're aware, Mr. Johns, that Mr. Colson really is a first-rate whip. I'm informed that it was his magnificent driving which first attracted the Rajah's attention." Mr. Johns did not exhibit much appearance of concern. "I guess I'll fix him anyhow. I haven't driven a stage over some of the worst country in the western states of America for nothing. I'll back myself to drive a coach and 4 along a wall just wide enough to hold the wheels, and I'll take you as a passenger if you like to come." "Thank you, Mr. Johns. My tastes do not incline that way." "Don't you worry, Mr. Greenall. I mean to take on the whole lot of them, one after the other, and show them a thing or two all round. These gentlemen here fancy they know a little, but we'll be more than even with them before we've done." The driving match came off. I do not know how they manage similar affairs in England. I have sometimes wondered. But I am under the impression that they are not managed on the lines on which they managed that driving match in Ahmednugger. The way in which they managed it was this. Mr. Colson was to drive upon the Monday, Mr. Johns upon the Wednesday, Each was to drive the same team, 8 in hand. The horses, by the way, came out of the Rajah's stables. The course was to be up and down the streets of Ahmednagar, and then for a certain distance outside the city. The judges occupied the front of the coach. I had a seat amongst the insignificant people at the back. On the whole, I was content to sit behind. The proceedings in the streets of Ahmednagar were distinctly exciting, almost too exciting, I felt, for me. Those streets were very narrow, and they were blocked with traffic. Be it understood, Mr. Colson and Mr. Johns, each with his 8 horses and a coachload of passengers, went down those streets at full speed, as if they had been 50 yards wide, and as if there had not been a soul in sight. What damages were done, and what was the list of the killed and wounded, I have never been informed. I never quite realized what it meant to belong to a subject race till then. It appeared to me that in the eyes of my companions a native had, as a matter of course, no rights at all. We drove over whole streets full of them, in style. My heart was in my mouth most of the time. We dashed around impossible corners, shaking native tenements to their foundations, but we kept ourselves alive somehow. The peaceful pedestrians were slain. I am no judge of coachmanship, of such coachmanship as that at any rate. Those who were judges, without a dissonant voice, awarded the palm to Mr. Johns, and in consequence, it was said, Mr. Colson entered himself as a candidate for delirium tremens. He was a dreadful man. It seemed as if Mr. Johns was prepared to match himself against the men of Ahmednagar at exactly those things at which each man fancied he was strongest. That is what he did do. He challenged any one of them to meet him at driving or at billiards, and when his challenge, for what seemed to me to be sufficient reasons, met with no response, he challenged any one to ride him. The challenge was taken up, but he beat all takers. He had a way with a horse which seemed little else than magical. A horse would jump 6 feet for him, when apparently it would not jump 6 inches for any other man in Ahmednagar. I don't know how it was, but so it was. I know nothing of Mr. Johns beyond what I am writing. I never heard his story, nor how it was that a man of genius, he was a man of genius, came to find himself a broken down small bookmaker in that little town up country. Perhaps he was another exemplification of the fact that only mediocrity succeeds. I know that I was more than even with the men of Ahmednagar by deputy. The band played to them as it had played to me. He made them face the music, and there was not one of them who did not leave his scalp upon the ground. My belt was adorned with trophies by deputy, for Mr. Johns had beaten the men of Ahmednagar as they had beaten me at riding and at driving and at billiards. He took them on at shooting, and, so to speak, he shot their heads off. He showed them that in the presence of this man they were as nothing and less than nothing. He even challenged Mr. Tebb to smash glass balls. He fixed the point from which they were to fire at an abnormal distance, and if I remember rightly, he beat Mr. Tebb by about a score. After he had annihilated that presumptuous young vagabond, Mr. Johns informed me that shooting at glass balls really was not shooting. I was quite prepared to admit it. He said that it was only a trick. When you had once mastered the trick, it was impossible to miss. Perhaps I have never fired at glass balls since then, so I have no reason to suppose that I have mastered the trick. When I do again fire at glass balls, I am inclined to think that I shall not experience the slightest difficulty in missing every one of them. End of chapter 3 of By Deputy. Recording by Peter John Keeble, Nottingham, United Kingdom. Section 28 of Amusement Only. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Peter John Keeble. Amusement Only by Richard Marsh. By Deputy. A Reminiscence of Travel. Chapter 4. Evens. When Mr. Johns had beaten the men of Ahmednugger at almost everything at which they could be beaten, he began to amuse himself by taking a hand in various little games at cards. It was remarked that, to say the least of it, his luck was wonderful. There was scarcely a man in Ahmednugger who had not been compelled by Mr. Johns to take a lower seat. To take a lower seat, too, just where he felt that his claim was strongest to take the highest one. Naturally, here and there a man resented it. An even stronger spirit of resentment was evinced when the men of Ahmednugger found that their money was going in search of their vanished reputations. There were some disagreeable little scenes. Then there was a royal row. It was at the club. Mr. Johns had been carrying everything in front of him. Things were said, then other things were said. Then Mr. Johns laid down his cards. He faced the company. "Gentlemen, I wish to inform you that you are individually and collectively a set of curs." There were sounds which suggested neither the ways of pleasantness nor the paths of peace. "Softly postpone the fighting for 1 minute. I would remind you that when Mr. Greenall appeared in Ahmednugger, you all with one accord took shots at him. You used him as if he had been a variety of old Aunt Sally. When I made my appearance, you put your heads together and you bested me. You see, we were strangers, and you took us in. Neither Mr. Greenall nor I quite like this sort of thing, so we put our heads together, and in our turn we've bested you. We've used you as old Aunt Sallies. We've made you all sit up. We've made you all sing small. Even at games of mingled chance and skill, I've beaten you. Instead of taking your punishment like men, you begin to whimper. Therefore, gentlemen, I repeat that you are, individually and collectively, a set of curs." Colonel Smith interposed so soon as Mr. Johns ceased speaking. I fancy that the colonel had only just entered the room. "Mr. Johns, you very much forget yourself." "On the contrary, colonel, I am remembering myself. It is the gentlemen you have the honour to command who forget themselves. Should there be anyone present who resents the words which I have used, I shall be happy to meet that person, either with the gloves or without them, or with any weapon he may choose, for the honour of Ahmednugger." There was silence, grim silence. Probably there was more than one there who would have liked to have ground Mr. Johns between the upper and the nether millstones. But after all, they were gentlemen in their way. Bean stood up, the adjutant of the th. He was a big fellow, head and shoulders taller than the audacious little challenger. He went round to where Mr. Johns was sitting. "Mr. Johns, you will either apologize for the words which you have just now used, or take a thrashing." "I will take a thrashing," said Mr. Johns. He took it. What is more, he took it there and then. The meeting was immediately adjourned, and in the moonlight the little argument came off. The proceedings were a trifle irregular. Perhaps over here we should deem them so. I am not prepared to say that any dignitaries were actually present. Still, there was a goodly gathering. The two men peeled. In a very short space of time the little man had knocked the big man senseless. This is not a fairy tale. It is a simple record of a sober matter of fact. It almost seems as if Mr. Johns was a lineal descendant of the Admiral Crichton. Looking back, I really fancy that he must have been. When Mr. Bean's satisfaction had been signified in what I believe is the usual manner, Mr. Johns addressed the lookers-on. "Is there any other gentleman present who would like to thrash me for the honour of Ahmednugger?" Someone came out of the shadow, someone who in those parts was a very great man indeed. Mr. Johns, you will be so good as to leave Ahmednugger within 24 hours. Mr. Johns looked the great man up and down. He seemed to be in no way awed, even though he stood there in the moonlight without his shirt. I am at a loss, sir, to understand by what authority you address yourself to me in such a manner. I am in no way answerable for my movements to you. I have not broken the law. I have not even broken the peace. As it happens, I do intend to leave Ahmednugger, and in less than 24 hours. Not in deference to your orders, but simply because I have had enough of Ahmednugger. Having taught your compatriots hereabout what it strikes me was a much-needed lesson, the next time they encounter strangers, except in the scriptural sense, not to take them in. The next day Mr. Johns did leave Ahmednugger, and I went too. He went his way, I went mine. I have neither seen nor heard of him since, but as I continued my journeyings, I felt that after all I had been even, and more than even, with the men of Ahmednugger by deputy. End of chapter 4 of By Deputy. Recording by Peter John Keeble, Nottingham, United Kingdom.
Section 29 of Amusement Only. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Stephen Kinford. Amusement Only by Richard Marsh. Mr. Whitings and Mary Ann. I did not mean to kiss her. It was a pure accident. Her face was close to mine, or my face was close to hers, and then her lips came into contact with my lips, or my lips came into contact with her lips. I don't know which it was. And then at that moment her mother came into the room, and she said, "Mr. Whiting, may I ask what is the meaning of this?" I said it meant nothing. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Only I found it difficult to explain, and when I did explain, she would not understand. Her manner was not at all the sort of thing I care for. The result is that I am engaged to Mary Ann Snelling without being conscious of having entertained any intention of the kind. Not that I have a word to say against Mary Ann, except that I never knew a girl with quite so many relations. To begin with, she had 6 brothers and 5 sisters, and she is the eldest of the batch, and there's not one of the brothers whom I feel drawn to. Her father is a most remarkable person, to say the least. After they had arranged between them that I was engaged to Mary Ann, I was really not allowed to have a voice in the matter. Her father remarked with a pointed air, which I cannot but think, under the circumstances, was unusual, that he thought it was about time that I did come to the scratch, and that if I had kept on dilly-dallying much longer, he would have had a word to say to me of a kind. I do not know what he meant, and would rather not attempt to imagine. But it is quite plain to me that all the arrangements for my wedding are going to be made by the Snellings. I do not know when it is going to be, but it will be either next week or the week after, certainly at the earliest possible moment, and I shouldn't be at all surprised to learn that all Mary Ann's things have been already bought, and perhaps some of them marked. We are to live in a house which belongs to a cousin of Mr. Snelling. It is to be furnished by a brother of Mrs. Snelling. The house linen is to be supplied by the father of the young man to whom Jane Matilda is engaged, and the ironmongery by the uncle to whom George Frederick is apprenticed. All, apparently, that is left for me to do is to pay for everything. It is most delightful. It might just as well be someone else's wedding. So unimportant is the part which I am set to play in it. And it is all the result of an accident. I deny that for the last 6 months I have been using Mr. Snelling's home as if it were a boarding house. Nothing of the kind. The mere suggestion is absurd. It is true that I have dropped in to dinner now and then, or to spend the evening, or for an afternoon call, or for an hour or 2 in the morning, but that has been simply and solely because the Snelling family have evinced so marked a desire for my society. The alteration which has taken place in their demeanor since my accident with Mary Ann is, therefore, all the more amazing. For instance, look at their behavior in the matter of the ring. The accident in question occurred upon the Sunday evening. I had been with Mary Ann to church, and had seen her home, and had had a little supper, and it was after supper that it happened. I did not go and purchase the engagement ring the first thing on the Monday morning. I own it. Certainly not. Nor did I take any steps in that direction during the whole of that week. I was not pressed for time. Besides, I was turning things over in my mind, but that was no reason why, the Monday week following, 4 of her brothers should have called on me on their way to the office, when I was scarcely out of bed and actually breakfasting, and assailed me in the way in which they did. There was William Henry, John Frank, Ferdinand Augustus, and Stephen Arthur, each of them twice my size, and all of them frightfully ignorant and wholly regardless of the sensitive little points of those with whom they came in contact. There is no circumlocution about them. They go straight at what they want, and were scarcely inside my door before they blurted out the purport of their coming. It was Frederick Augustus. If the thing is possible, he is, if anything, more direct even than the rest of his family. Look here, Whiting. How about Mary Ann's ring? The girl is fretting, but you don't seem to notice it, and as you don't appear to know what is the proper thing to do in a case of this kind, and don't understand that the ring ought to be bought straight away, we've bought it for you. I gasped, positively gasped. Am I to understand that you've purchased my engagement ring? That's it, on your account, from a cousin of ours who's in that line. I never saw people like the Snellings for possessing relatives in all sorts of lines. No matter what you want, or do not want, and never will want, they are sure to have some relative who has dealt in it his or her whole life long. They produced the ring and told me what I had to pay for it. A handsome price it was. I was persuaded that somebody besides that cousin got a profit out of Mary Ann's engagement ring, but I handed over the amount. I did not want any unpleasantness, and I am quite sure there would have been unpleasantness had I demurred. Later in the day I took it with me, when I went to call on Mary Ann. She appeared to be surprised, almost into speechlessness, when I presented it to her. Her head dropped on my shoulder, and she kissed me under the chin, observing, "You dear old Sam." The moments when I am alone with Mary Ann are alleviations for those more frequent moments when I am not alone with Mary Ann. Still I noticed that the ring fitted her perfectly, and I could not but wonder if she had tried it on before. At the same time I am beginning to be comforted by a suspicion that Mary Ann is on my side. On my side, that is, against the rest of her family. There's been a difference of opinion as to where we are to spend our honeymoon. It is from her action in that matter that my suspicion springs. The Snellings have an aunt who lives in an out-of-the-way hole at the other end of nowhere. The woman's name is Brady. There she owns a cottage, or it may be a pigsty, for all I know. When she heard of my engagement with Mary Ann, she wrote and suggested that we should spend our honeymoon in her cottage, or pigsty, and that I should pay her rent for it. The matter was talked about at dinner. Mary Ann was silent for some time. Then she quietly remarked, "Don't trouble yourselves to discuss Aunt Brady's proposal. I shall do nothing of the kind." This observation was followed by perfect silence. The members of the family looked at one another, but after a very considerable pause, her mother said, with quite unusual mildness, "Very well, my dear, then it's settled." After dinner, I took advantage of an opportunity which offered to thank Mary Ann for her action in the matter, because, of course, I had no wish to spend my honeymoon in a place of which I knew nothing, to oblige an aunt of whom I knew still less. Mary Ann beamed at me, and she said, "You dear old man." Presently she continued, "Do you know that in marrying me, you are doing the best thing for yourself that you ever did in all your life?" I endeavored to explain to her that I felt sure of it, but I fear that my explanation was a little stumbling. But she went on with the most perfect fluency. There were no signs of faltering about her flow of language. "You want someone who can look after you, and you could not, by any chance, have chosen a person who will look after you better than I shall?" Such an assurance was most satisfactory. We had a long confidential chat on matters of business. I found that as a woman of business, she was beyond all my expectations. I told her exactly what my income was, and the source from which it came, and all about it. She drew up a plan on which we were to lay it out. It was an admirable plan. I had never had one, but I saw clearly that in that way the money would go twice as far. It turned out that she had a little money of her own, about £130 a year, and, of course, I had my expectations and she had hers. It was plain that together we should manage most comfortably. Delightfully, in fact. On the subject of wedding presents, too, her ideas were the most lucid I ever encountered. It was wonderful to listen to her, really wonderful. "I shall make Papa give me £500 at least. A bird in the hand is worth two in a bush, and it will be something to have by us." I quite agreed with her remarks about the bird in the hand, and it certainly would be something to have by us. "I know what Mamma can afford to give, and I will see she gives it. And I will see that there is no shirking about the boys, or about the girls either. I will take care that my relations do their duty. I have drawn up a list of all the people who ought to give us a present, and I shall tell them what they ought to give. It won't be my fault if I don't get it. Of course, there are some people with whom you can't be perfectly plain, but I shall be as plain as I can. There's a way and a manner of doing that kind of thing. I have no intention of being presented with an endless collection of duplicates or a lot of useless rubbish which I don't know what to do with. If you take my advice, you will follow in my footsteps." I endeavored to. At least I drew up a list of people who ought to meet the occasion, and I tried in more than one instance to drop a hint of what, as I felt, they ought to meet it with. But I am bound to admit that so far my success has been as nothing compared with hers. Hers has been prodigious. It is certain that we have a large collection of really valuable property about the house, the wedding presents to Mary Ann. She has a knack of getting people to do what she wishes and to give her what she wants, which is a little short of miraculous. The singular feature about the situation is that people are actually beginning to pity me, to sympathize with me for being about to marry Mary Ann. I notice that they are generally persons who have already tendered their offerings. The fact of having given Mary Ann a wedding present seems to fill them with a feeling of rancorous acidity which, to me, is inexplicable. My belief is that they have been induced to spend at least twice as much as they intended, and that they resent it. Such is the selfishness of human nature. But why, on that account, they should pity me, I altogether fail to understand. We have all been giving Mary Ann presents, and I suppose you, Mr. Whiting, have been giving her something too. That was what Mrs. Macpherson said to me only the other day. I have given Mary Ann 2 or 3 trifles, and I said so. And what, inquired Mrs. Macpherson, has Mary Ann given you? Her love. Someone sniggered. I cannot pretend to explain why, except on the supposition that romance is dead, at least in that circle of society in which the Snellings move. But that is not the only society the world contains. As a matter of fact, Mary Ann has given me a pair of slippers, worked by her own hands. It is true that they are a trifle large for me, and that I shall never be able to keep them on my feet except when I am sitting still. But Mary Ann does not seem to think that that matters, so why should I? Her youngest sister, Clara Louisa, has quite gratuitously informed me that she has had them by her for some considerable time, and that, not to put too fine a point on it, they were originally designed for another individual altogether, a Mr. Pilbeam. But even supposing that what Clara Louisa says is true, of which I have no evidence, I have surely cause to congratulate myself on standing literally in Mr. Pilbeam's shoes, even if they are a little spacious. On the whole, I do not know that I regret that accident I had with Mary Ann. It is true that there are times when I am a little disposed to wish that she were not quite so good a manager. Now and then every man likes to call his soul his own. On the other hand, she is well qualified to protect me from the rest of the family. She will keep them at bay, because it is beginning to dawn on me that single-handedly she is more than a match for them, which is just as well. If she had been like me, they would have rent us limb from limb. As it is, unless I am mistaken, some of the rending will be on our side, and they know it. P.S. The cards are out for the wedding. It is to take place on Tuesday fortnight. We're going for our honeymoon to Italy and the south of France. A second cousin of Mary Ann's is in the Cook's Tours line. He has given us free passes all the way to the end of our journey and all the way back again, and coupons for free board and lodging at the hotel. It's a wedding present, so that, as Mary Ann says, our honeymoon need cost us practically nothing, besides which we can always sell the coupons and railway passes which we don't use. Nothing could be more delightful. End of Mr. Whiting's and Mary Ann. Recording by Stephen Kinford, Sharon Township, Ohio.
Section 30 of Amusement Only. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Kevin Alex. Amusement Only by Richard Marsh. A substitute. The story of my last cricket match. Chapter 1. I am appointed captain. I have some idea of cricket. Not much, perhaps, but I certainly have some. I was not in the varsity team, nor near it, but I played in the freshmen's match and provided myself with spectacles. I was nearly in the school team once. That was when I carried my bat for 45. I must own that my performance was a surprise to everyone, and to myself among the rest. But as I never repeated it, or anything like it, they left me, very wisely, out of the 11. Thus it will be seen that, from a cricketing point of view, I did not, even in my best days, come up to first-rate form, and my best days were, reckoning from last summer, quite 15 years ago. During those 15 years I do not remember once handling a bat, far less hitting at a cricket ball with one, and yet in the state of unpreparedness I had the presumption last summer to captain a team and to lead them on, well, not to victory, but to disgrace. It's a fact. The match was Storwell versus Latchmere. Storwell was my team, and as I do not think a more remarkable match was ever known in the whole annals of cricketing history, I here venture to report it. When they first asked me to play, I thought they were mad. Storwell-on-Sea is a village on the south coast. I beg pardon. I believe it is called by the inhabitants a town. It is a pretty place, and not unknown in the locality. It has a season and all that kind of thing, and it was during the season I was there. And one day a deputation of the inhabitants called on me at my lodgings to ask if I would lead the local cricket club to, say, victory. As I have said, my first impression was that they were mad. Either that, or else that they were playing it off on the unprotected stranger. I hinted so much to the deputation. The deputation smiled. The chief spokesman was the local barber. His name was Sapsworth. He explained that Mr. Wingrave had sent them there. Wingrave was the vicar. We were up together, and he must have known quite well whereabouts my cricketing form came in. I decided to crush the deputation before the thing went farther. To show you the sort of man you propose should captain you, I need only mention that it is more than 15 years since I had a bat in my hand. But the admission did not crush them. Quite the other way. It opened the floodgates of their eloquence. "That's nothing!" Mr. Sapsworth cried. "There's Hedges here. We've had to put him in. He don't even know the rules of the game, and he's just turned 61." I glanced at Mr. Hedges, thus frankly referred to. He was a smiling, red-faced, bald-headed old gentleman who, if not considerable in height, was great in girth. He would certainly have turned the scale at 16 stone. I felt that, to cricketers who intended to play Mr. Hedges, any objections which I might urge would appear quite trivial. "When is the match to be?" I asked. "Tomorrow," was the startling reply. I was speechless. That I, after 15 years' total abstention, should be asked to captain a team the members of which were entire strangers to me, and of whose individual styles of play I had not the faintest notion, in a match against an unknown foe, at 24 hours' notice, was a little hard to credit. It was altogether too preposterous. I told them so, but they could not be brought to see it. The end of it was that I agreed to play. No man knows to what a depth of folly he can sink until he tries. End of Chapter 1 of A Substitute. Section 31 of Amusement Only. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Kevin Alex. Amusement Only by Richard Marsh. A Substitute. The Story of My Last Cricket Match. Chapter 2. Mr. Benyon Bowls. The match was to be played on Mr. Stubbs' field. Mr. Stubbs was a local butcher. Mr. Sapsworth had kindly promised to come and escort me to the scene of action. He arrived at 9:30, just as I was opening my morning's letters. On the way he gave me a chart of the country. It appeared that in batting we were not strong, in fielding we were weak, and that our bowling was more than shaky. "But we shall pull through," Mr. Sapsworth added, "especially now," and he glanced at me. "I hope you are under no delusion as to my powers, Mr. Sapsworth. I never was a first-rate cricketer, and, as I have already told you, it is more than 15 years since I handled a bat. If you'll excuse my saying so, sir, I've generally noticed that them who doesn't say much does a deal." That was one way of looking at it, no doubt, but if I did a deal, I could only say that it would be a pleasant surprise to me. "And our opponents? What sort of a team are they?" Mr. Sapsworth turned up his nose, not metaphorically, but as a matter of fact. "If we're bad," he said, "they're wuss. There's only one thing I've ever seen those Latchmere blokes much good at, and that is cheating. You'll have to keep a sharp eye on them, or they'll have all our chaps out when they ain't, and they won't go out themselves, not even when you've bowled their 3 stumps down all of a row." "Surely," I suggested, "those sort of questions are for the umpires to decide." "Umpires!" Up went Mr. Sapsworth's nose again. "They bring their own umpire, and he's got his own ideas of umpiring, he has. But we've got our own umpire as well as them." I said nothing, but Mr. Sapsworth's words conveyed to my mind pleasant impressions of the strict rigor of the game. When we arrived there was a goodly gathering already assembled in Mr. Stubbs' field. A tent was erected. In and about it was a nondescript collection of men and boys, some 40 or 50 others, availing themselves of the opportunity afforded them for a little practice, were actually disporting themselves on the pitch on which we were presently to play. I consoled myself with the reflection that the worse the ground was, the more my bowling would tell. Mr. Sapsworth introduced me to the crowd en masse. Several persons touched their caps to me, others nodded their heads. Some grinned. "Good morning, gentlemen. We're going to have a fine day for our match. Our team all here?" Mr. Sapsworth took upon himself to answer. He had been searching about him with his eyes. "They're here, all right. I suppose those Latchmere chaps ain't come yet?" They had not come, and they did not come for an hour or more. I employed the interval in becoming acquainted with the individual members, arranging the order of going in, and their positions in the field. Matters in appearance simple enough, but more difficult in practice. But at last the preliminaries were settled somehow, and the Latchmere men appeared upon the ground. Their captain, coming up, was introduced to me. I was informed afterwards that he was a blacksmith. I thought he was by the way in which he grasped my hand. His opening speech was a little surprising. "We ain't going to play you if you've got 11 men, you know." I inquired into his meaning. "We've only got 10," he said, "and one of them's Soft Sawney, and another's Sprouts." I did not know if those were the correct names of the gentlemen referred to, or only fancy ones by which they were known to their friends, but he laid his hand on 2 of his followers and hauled them to the front. One was a long, weedy youth, who, one saw at a glance, was more than half an imbecile, and the other was a portly old gentleman of 55 or 6, with a corporation like a barrel. Mr. Sapsworth intervened. "What's that?" he cried. "We've got Hedges." He brought Mr. Hedges forward. I could not but feel that, to say the least of it, Mr. Hedges balanced Mr. Sprouts. If Mr. Hedges could run more than a dozen yards without pausing to take breath, I was almost ready to express my willingness to eat my hat. "But we've only got 10 men," persisted Mr. Barker. "You'll only have to have 10. If you think we're going to play against your 11, we won't play you at all, so that's all about it." There was a prospect of unpleasantness even before the match began. It seemed that one of us would have to retire, in satisfaction of Mr. Barker's rather unjustifiable demand. I was about to retire myself, for I instinctively felt that, as a captain, I was no match for Mr. Barker, when a rather curious incident occurred. On a sudden a newcomer appeared upon the scene. I say on a sudden, for no one had noticed his approach, and yet all at once there he was, standing between the Latchmere captain and myself. To me, at any rate, his presence was so unexpected, and indeed so startling, that I stared. He seemed to have come out of space. He was a big, burly fellow, with smooth cheeks, round face, bullet-shaped head, and sleepy-looking black eyes. "Let me play for you?" he said. For a moment Mr. Barker stared at the stranger in surprise, in common with the rest of us. Then he jumped at the offer. "Let you, rather!" He thrust out his hand and caught the stranger's palm in his. But no sooner had he got it firmly gripped than he dropped it with an exclamation. "Why, what's the matter with you? Ain't you well? Your hand's as cold as a frozen corpse." I went a little aside with Mr. Sapsworth. "Who is he?" I asked. "I don't know, and yet I seem somehow to have seen his face before. But let them have him. He doesn't look as though he were up to much." He did not. Anyone looking less like a cricketer I have seldom seen. His costume was ridiculous. He had on a pair of large check trousers, a check of the kind which the Oxford tailor explained to the undergraduate was a leetle too large to be seen to advantage on a single pair of understandings. He had on a huge top hat of a size and shape which would have made the fortune of a lion comique. A red woolen muffler was wound several times round his neck, and his capacious person was enveloped in an enormous overcoat, the like of which I had never seen before. The day promised to remind us of the torrid zone, yet Mr. Barker had cried out that the stranger's hand felt cold. In the toss for innings victory fell to us, so we went in. I led the van. My associate was a youth named Fenning. He was a mere lad, and looked too much of a lout to be much of a cricketer. Mr. Barker led the bowling. I soon saw that if he had any strength it was not as a bowler. If I kept my head, I told myself, and he carried away my bails, it would be owing to the ground. For a rougher piece of turf, I suppose, few wickets have been pitched upon. But I was far too nervous to take liberties even with Mr. Barker, and indeed when the first over was finished, I found myself still in, I drew a long breath of self-congratulation. The other bowler was, in his own line, as meritorious a specimen as his captain. So on the whole, things were going better than I had expected. I had scored 11, 6 off Mr. Barker, and the rest off his friend. Even Fenning had hit up too, literally hit up. I was really beginning to think that I was getting set, which in my palmiest days had only happened once, thrice happy day, when something took place which showed me, not for the first time, the advisability of never counting your chickens till the eggs are hatched. Mr. Barker was just about to commence an over. He actually had the ball in his hand when the substitute, the stranger who had volunteered to fill the place of the 11th man, came marching right across the field. Mr. Barker saw him coming, and called out to him to stay where he was. But wholly unheeding, the substitute strode on. He reached Mr. Barker, and without saying a word, so far as I could perceive, he coolly held out his hand for the ball. I fully expected that the Latchmere captain would remonstrate, and not only remonstrate, but remonstrate strongly. But to my surprise he instantly surrendered the ball, and slunk rather than walked to the place which the stranger had just quitted. So the substitute was left to bowl. Without doubt he was an eccentric character. Up to that moment he had been fielding in his woolen muffler, his overcoat, and last but not least, his wonderful top hat. These, however, he now doffed, and laid in a heap upon the ground. Their disappearance revealed the fact that he wore a tight-fitting jacket which was the same wonderful pattern in checks as his trousers. From the look of him, I certainly never supposed that he could bowl. My surprise was, therefore, all the greater when I discovered that he could. His action was peculiar. He went right up to the wicket, and stood quite still, delivering the ball with a curious flourish of the wrist. Its pace was amazing. It pitched a good 2 feet to the off, and broke right in, perhaps aided by the ground, though he certainly had found a spot. I was so astounded by the pace, which reminded me of the old stories told of Lily White, you could hear it humming in the air, that I never even moved my bat. It was that which saved me. As it was, the bat was all but driven out of my hand. I told myself that on the arrival of a second edition I should have to go. Yet I did manage to stop the next 4 balls. How, I have not the faintest notion. But the 6th, for it seemed that, in those parts, they bowled 6 to the over, took my middle stump, breaking it clean off at the top. As I entered the tent, the scorer cried out, "What name?" "Tom Benyon," replied the bowler. Mr. Hedges, who was seated at the scorer's side, brought down his fist upon the trestle table with a bang. "I knew it was. I knowed him all along." Mr. Hedges was in a state of odd excitement. "That chap who bowled you ain't a man, sir. He's a ghost." "He manages to put a good deal of pace on the ball for a ghost," I answered. "And so he ought to. Did you hear what name he said? He said Tom Benyon. There wasn't a better cricketer in all these parts than Tom Benyon used to be. He played up in London more than once, I know, and got well paid for playing, too. But he always was a queer sort, was Tom. I knew him well. I saw him buried. And if it is him, and not his ghost, he ain't grown a day older these 20 years. He ain't." I laughed. I suppose the old gentleman was jesting, but not a bit of it. When our second man had gone to the wicket, Mr. Sapsworth drew me aside. "I don't like the look of this," he said. "Nor I answered, supposing he referred to Mr. Benyon's bowling. "He'll bring down our stumps like ninepins." "It isn't that. It's the man," he said. "Do you mean the ghost?" I asked jokingly. "It's easy to laugh, but—" Mr. Sapsworth paused. I could see he was ashamed of himself, yet he had suspicions none the less. I thought I had seen him before, and I had. It is Tom Benyon. "He says he is Tom Benyon, and I suppose he should know best." "Yes," Mr. Sapsworth fidgeted, "but Tom Benyon's been dead these 20 years." "Dead!" I cried, and laughed. "He showed himself too much alive for me, at any rate." "When I was a youngster," continued Mr. Sapsworth, "Tom Benyon used to come into my father's shop to be shaved. He was always on the drink. One morning I was all alone, minding the shop for father, when he came in, mad drunk. I never shall forget that morning, never. He made me sit in the shaving chair, and set about to shave me. He soaped me all over, face and hair and all. I was that there frightened I couldn't make a sound. I never shall forget how I sat and watched him, with the soap all in my eyes, as he put an edge upon the razor. Then he set about shaving off my hair. He'd got off about half of it, and I was streaming with blood, when who should come in but my father. If he hadn't, Tom Benyon would have made an end of me." He paused. I perceived that the mere recollection of his little adventure affected him unpleasantly. "There was something queer about his death. Some people said it was drink had done for him. Some of 'em said he had done for himself. Anyhow, the whole countryside was at his funeral. I was there. I remember it as plainly as though it was yesterday." While I was looking at Mr. Sapsworth and pondering his words, there came the sound of laughter from the middle of the ground. It was not a loud laugh, but it was a distinctly disagreeable one. I looked round. Mr. Benyon was laughing at Mr. Fenning's discomfiture. He had served him as he had served me. He had taken his middle stump right out of the ground. I turned to Mr. Sapsworth. "You follow." "Me?" Mr. Sapsworth turned several shades whiter. "Me?" He looked about him with a frightened air. "Mr. Trentham, I can't," he said. "Nonsense, Sapsworth. You don't mean to say that you are going to allow yourself to be frightened by any nonsense about a ghost, and in broad daylight, too?" The little man did not look by any means reassured by my tone of derision. He seemed more inclined to take to his heels than to take his place at the wickets. It is not impossible that he might have done so had he not been addressed from a different quarter. "Bob Sapsworth!" It was Mr. Benyon calling to the little barber right across the field. "Come and be shaved!" I own that I myself was startled. The words were apposite, to say the least of it. We had just been speaking of Mr. Sapsworth's experience of the shaver's art as practiced by Mr. Benyon's hands, and here was Mr. Benyon's namesake inviting him, if not to be cut, at least to come again. On Mr. Sapsworth the effect of the invitation was surprising. He had on his pads. His bat was in his hand. Without a word he shuffled towards the stumps. If I ever saw a man go to the wickets in a state of mortal funk, I saw him then. I myself moved towards the scoring tent. The state of things within it at once impressed me as peculiar. It had been filled, a little time ago, with jovial faces. Now, the owners of those faces might have been attendants at a funeral, and many a man has had a livelier following to the grave than I saw assembled then. Fenning came shambling into the tent. I spoke to him. "Mr. Benyon's bowling was too much for you, eh, Fenning?" Unless I am mistaken, Mr. Fenning wiped a tear out of his eye. He certainly put up his hand and rubbed the optic with his knuckles. "I never seed such bowling. 'Tain't fair," he said. "What is there unfair about it, Fenning?" "It comes so sharp. I never seed the ball afore there was my wickets down." I smiled. Not so the company. They regarded Mr. Fenning's words with different eyes. Mr. Hedges gave expression to the general opinion. You ain't never seen such bowling afore, and you won't never see such bowling again. 'Cause why? 'Cause it's a ghost that's bowling, not a man." Mr. Fenning looked about him with open eyes, and with open mouth as well. "A ghost," he mumbled. "A ghost," said Mr. Hedges. I expostulated. "Come, Mr. Hedges, you frighten the lad. I am surprised, too, that a man of your age and experience and wisdom should talk nonsense about ghosts." Mr. Hedges looked up at me a little sharply. "If he ain't a ghost, what's become of the things that he's took off?" I asked him what he meant. He pointed across the ground. "He took off his hat and his coat and his scarf, and he laid 'em on the grass. He ain't touched 'em, and no one ain't took 'em, yet they're gone. We saw 'em go. If he ain't a ghost, what's become of the things that he's took off?" Mr. Hedges grew a little excited. I looked in the direction in which the old gentleman was pointing. The garments he referred to had apparently vanished, but of course their disappearance was susceptible of a most natural explanation. I should have maintained this proposition with more confidence had it not been for something which immediately occurred. Mr. Benyon was preparing to deliver his first ball to Mr. Sapsworth, and as I eyed him I noted the extremely unworkmanlike attitude in which Mr. Sapsworth awaited the delivery. Preparatory to delivering the ball, Mr. Benyon divested himself of his remarkable coat, which matched his trousers, and in so doing disclosed a waistcoat which matched his coat. Neatly folding up the garment, he laid it beside him on the ground. No sooner did it touch the ground than it disappeared. I am unable to say how, but it did, and that before the eyes of all the lookers on. This singular behavior on the part of that curious garment took me by surprise. After that I was prepared to excuse a certain amount of nervousness on the part of Mr. Sapsworth. To Mr. Benyon, Mr. Sapsworth's nervousness seemed to afford positive pleasure. He cried in a tone which was perhaps meant to be jovial, "Now, Bob Sapsworth, prepare to be shaved." The ball went from his hand like lightning. Mr. Sapsworth yelled. Mr. Benyon sent down his second ball. Whack! Not against the bat, but, I should say, as nearly as possible against the same portion of Mr. Sapsworth's frame which it had struck before. Any cricketer might have been demoralized after receiving two such blows, but he would at least have tried to get out of the way of the ball instead of in it. Mr. Sapsworth placed his person exactly where the ball might be expected to come, and for once in a way expectation was realized. It did come. The third, fourth, and fifth balls found an exactly similar billet, and the sixth not only knocked his bat out of his trembling hands, but all three of his stumps clean out of the ground. "I said I'd shave you, Bobby," shouted Mr. Benyon, as the victim went limping from the place of execution. "Next man in," I said. "I ain't going in," courteously rejoined the player whose turn it was to follow. I was about to ask him why, when I was saved the trouble by Mr. Benyon. "Jack Hawthorne." Oddly enough, the man's name was Hawthorne, though how Mr. Benyon came to know that he was next man in is more than I can say. Mr. Hawthorne was a huge fellow, quite 6 feet high, but at the sound of Mr. Benyon's voice he rose, docile as a child. "I'm waiting for you." Without pads, Mr. Hawthorne went striding across the turf, content to use the bat which Mr. Sapsworth had left lying on the ground. That hero came limping into the tent. "It's a ghost," he said. I could not but feel that the fellow was something of a cur. To this feeling I gave expression. Ghost or no ghost, rather than let him pound me all over the body with the ball, I would have made one try to hit at it. And you told me that you were an all-around player. No doubt the man must have been suffering considerable pain, but I was too much annoyed at his cowardice to feel for him. Besides, the whole thing was so preposterous. Undoubtedly, as a trundler Mr. Benyon was superb. I have no hesitation in saying that I do not remember to have seen finer bowling than his on any ground in England. He combined two things which, so far as I am aware, are not to be found together in any living player, pace, and break. But it was not his bowling, fine as it was, which promised to work our ruin, so much as the absurd belief entertained by the members of the team that he, check trousers and all, was a ghost. An idea came into my head. I resolved that I would ask him, point blank, in the face of all the people, if he was a ghost. If his answers did not satisfy the doubters, nothing would. The opportunity occurred just as he was about to begin his following over. Moving from the tent, I advanced towards the wickets. "Excuse me, Mr. Benyon, but before you commence to bowl, might I speak to you a word?" He turned and looked at me. As he did so I was conscious that, in the most emphatic sense of the word, his appearance was peculiar. He looked as though he were a corpse, and an unhealthy corpse to boot, the sort of corpse that no man would spend the night with willingly. And this unpleasant appearance was accentuated by his ridiculous attire. Fancy a dead man, of a bloated habit of body, taking his walks abroad in a suit of checks, each check 12 inches square. I was so uncomfortably conscious that Mr. Benyon did not look a clubbable kind of man that I faltered in my speech. "You will excuse me, Mr. Benyon, if the question I am about to put to you appears to you even worse than absurd, but the members of my team have some ridiculous notion in their heads that you are a certain Tom Benyon who died 20 years ago, and who now lies buried in a churchyard. I am sure, therefore, you will forgive my asking, are you a ghost?" Mr. Benyon eyed me, and I eyed him, not willingly, but because, for some reason or other, I could not help it. At last he answered, speaking in a sort of shout, "I am." Of course such an answer was absurd, ridiculously absurd. As I sit here writing, no man could be more conscious of its absurdity than I am. But then it was not that I was so conscious of as of a cold shiver going all down my back, and of a sort of feeling as though Providence had sent me out into the world knock-kneed. I struggled against a strong inclination to sit down upon the turf and stop there. But being at the same time dimly aware that I was making an unexampled fool of myself, I made a frantic effort to regain the use of my tongue. "Oh, you are a ghost. I thought so. Thanks." How I got back to the tent I have not the faintest notion, but I do know that after that exhibition of the sort of stuff that I was made of, disaster followed hard upon disaster. The first wicket, my own, had fallen for 13 runs. The second and the third had seen the score unaltered. Hawthorne was the fourth man in. He was so fortunate as to appear upon the scene just as I put my fatal question. It was to give him a chance I put it. The answer settled him, that is, if there was anything left to settle. I am not able to state exactly what became of him, but I have a clear impression that he was out at the end of the over. Moreover, of this I am well assured, that 9 wickets fell without an addition being made to the score. I suppose that is, in its way, a record. Whether Mr. Benyon owed the inhabitants of his native place a grudge, the evidence before me does not enable one to decide. But if he did, he certainly paid it in full that day. Although he bowled at the wickets he hit the players first. Nor was this, so far as appearances went, in any way his fault. They seemed to have a singular knack of getting just in the way of the ball. The order of the innings was this. The ball hit each man 5 times, and the wickets once. At the end of each of Mr. Benyon's overs, a batsman returned to the tent a sadder and a lamer man. One case in particular was hard. It was the case of Mr. Hedges. He was the last man in. When his turn came, with the score still at 13 runs, he stuck to his seat like glue. "Won't somebody go in for me?" he asked, as he saw his doom approaching. "I ain't no cricketer," he added, a little later on. "Now am I?" He asked the question of his friends, but his friends were still. He addressed himself to Mr. Sapsworth. "Bob Sapsworth, you asked me to play, now didn't you? You says to me, 'If you play, William Hedges,' you says, 'I shouldn't be surprised but what the gent as we're going to ask to captain us stand you a free lunch, you says, not to speak of drinks, you says. I pricked up my ears at this, but held my tongue. But you says nothing about being bowled at by a ghost. Now did you now? I ask you, Bob Sapsworth, did you now? Mr. Sapsworth was silent. The old gentleman went on. I shan't go in, he announced. That was when the 9th batsman had received Mr. Benyon's first ball upon his person. Nothing shan't make me go in to be bowled at by a ghost. The second announcement followed the delivery of the second ball upon the batsman's person. I ain't no cricketer, and I don't know nothing about the rules of the game, and I ain't going to stand up to be chucked at by a ghost. And Mr. Hedges struck his fist upon the board. There came a yell from the wickets. Mr. Hedges gripped his seat tightly with his hands. I won't go in, he cried. Another ball, another yell. Mr. Hedges repeated his determination over and over again, as if in its reiteration he sought for strength to keep it. I won't, I won't, I won't. The last ball of the over, and the 9th of our hopes had fallen. A pause ensued. The batsman came limping towards the tent. Mr. Hedges' time was come. He clutched at the seat with the frenzy of despair. Bill Hedges, sang out Mr. Benyon, but Mr. Hedges gave no sign. Bill Hedges! Still no reply. Bill Hedges, have I got to come and fetch you? At that awful threat the old gentleman did rise. His ample form went waddling across the ground. I'm a-coming, Tom. I ain't no cricketer, Tom. Though don't you be too hard on me. If you must hit me, let it be behind. Where's your bat? The inquiry came from Mr. Benyon. Mr. Hedges had arrived at the wicket without that batsman's requisite. He scratched his head. My bat? I don't want no bat. I ain't no cricketer. You can hit me quite as well without it, Tom. Go and get your bat. Mr. Hedges went and got it. When he had it, it was evident that he had but rudimentary notions of its uses. He held it gingerly, round side foremost, as though he were afraid that if he grasped it tightly it would burn him. Bill Hedges, do you remember those drinks you paid for me the Saturday week before I died? No, Tom. I can't say rightly as how I do. You did. It was at the Crown and Anchor. I had no money. I said if you'd stand Sam, I'd pay you back again. But I never did. I'll pay you now. Mr. Benyon paid him 5 times over. The old gentleman bore it like a lamb. Whack! 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 And the fall of his wicket at the end. As he returned towards the tent he wiped his wrinkled brow. I always said I wasn't no cricketer, and I ain't, he said. End of Chapter 2 of A Substitute. Section 32 of Amusement Only. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Kevin Alex. Amusement Only by Richard Marsh. A Substitute. The Story of My Last Cricket Match. Chapter 3. And Bats. Our innings was over for 13 runs. We sat there, moping in a crowd, I among the rest, when Mr. Benyon, bustling up, reminded me of my duties as a captain. Now then, turn out. Send your men into the field. We can't stop here all day. I'm first man in. Soon I'll have to go, and I haven't had a smack at a cricket ball these 20 years. We looked at each other. One part of his address gave us a certain gratification, that part in which he stated that he soon would have to go. We turned out. I suppose a more unpromising set of fieldsmen never yet took their places in the field. The Latchmere men went slouching towards the tent. Some of them, I noticed, instead of going in, stole towards the rear. These, I suspect, stole off the ground. I never set eyes on them again. "Mr. Trenham, I can't bowl," whispered Mr. Sapsworth to me as we moved across the turf. He and I had agreed that we should start the bowling. I confess that I felt no more inclined to act up to the letter of our agreement than he did, but Mr. Benyon intervened. "Now, Bob Sapsworth, you take the bowling one end and let your captain take the other. Captain, you take first over." I obeyed without a murmur. It might have been quite a usual thing to see in a match a member of one team ordering about the captain of the other. I do not think that our field was arranged on scientific principles. I may certainly claim that I had nothing to do with its arrangement. There is a suspicion floating through my mind that at one or two points, two or more men were placed unusually close together. For instance, at deep mid-off, very deep mid-off, Mr. Hawthorne and Mr. Hedges were not only doing their best to trample on each other's toes, but each was seeking for a place of security behind the other's back. Mr. Barker shared with Mr. Benyon the honor of being first man in. The Latchmere captain, as a captain, had become quite as much a figurehead as I had. His bearing was indicative of extreme depression. I think he had learned that to take off-hand the first substitute who offered was, now and then, unwise. To enable him to bat with more advantage, Mr. Benyon had removed his waistcoat, which matched his trousers and his coat. What he had done with it I cannot say. Possibly it had vanished, with his other garments, into air. Now he had on a bright red flannel shirt. His tastes in costume seemed a trifle lurid, the sleeves of which were turned up above the elbows. His pose was almost as peculiar as his costume. He stood bolt upright, his legs together, his feet drawn heel to heel, not at all in the fashion of a modern cricketer, who seeks to guard his wickets with his legs. His bat he held straight down in front of him, the blade swinging gently in the air. I am afraid I wasted more time in preparing to deliver my first ball than I need have done, but if Mr. Benyon had not had a smack with a bat for 20 years, it was a good 15 since I had bowled a ball. After such a lapse of time one requires to pull oneself together before exhibiting one's powers to a cricketer of Mr. Benyon's caliber. He, however, did not seem to recognize the necessity which I myself felt that I was under. "Hurry up, sir. Don't I tell you that soon I'll have to go?" I hurried up. I gave him an overhand full pitch, which would have made a decent catch for Point, if Point had been close in, which he wasn't. However, in any case, Mr. Benyon would have saved him the trouble. He hit the ball a crack the like of which I had never seen before. He drove it over the hedge, and over the trees, and up to the skies, and out of sight. "I don't think that's a bad little smack to start with," he observed. "I like your kind of bowling, mister. I suppose that's a boundary." He called to the scorer, if there was one, which I doubt, "Put down Tom Benyon 6." He turned again to me. "It's no good wasting time looking for that ball. I've another in my pocket you can have." He put his hand into his trousers pocket. Those remarkable garments fitted him like eel skins. I had certainly never supposed that he could by any possibility have such a thing as a cricket ball in one of the pockets, but it appeared that he had. He drew one out and threw it up to me. My second ball was a colorable imitation of my first, only this time it was wide to leg. To long leg Mr. Benyon sent it flying. "Put down Tom Benyon another 6," he cried. "I do like your bowling, mister. I've got another ball which you can have." He produced a second ball from the same pocket from which the first had come. I could scarcely believe my eyes, but I was discovering, with Horatio, that there were more things in heaven and earth than had been contained in my philosophy. Since Mr. Benyon professed such affection for the style of bowling which I favored, I sent him down another sample. This time it was fairly straight, by which I mean that it would not have pitched more than a yard from the wickets if Mr. Benyon had allowed it to pitch, which he didn't. He treated it as he had done the first. He drove it with terrific force right above my head. "Never mind about the ball," he said. "I've got another in my pocket." He had, the third, and in the same pocket from which the other two had come. My fourth ball he treated to a swipe to square leg. He seemed to have a partiality for swiping. Quite unnecessarily he allowed that this was so. "I do like a ball which I can get a smack at," he remarked, as he produced a fourth ball from the same pocket of his tightly fitting trousers which had contained the other three. "A swipe does warm me so. Your kind of bowling, mister,'s just the thing." It was kind of him to say so, though to my thinking his remark did not convey a compliment. When he sent my fifth ball out of sight, I wished that his love for swiping had been less, or my bowling of another kind. The sixth, however, which he also produced from the same wondrous store contained in his breeches pocket, he contented himself with what he called snicking. "That's what I call a pretty snick," he said. The snick in question was a tremendous drive to deep mid-off. It was stopped quite involuntarily by Mr. Hawthorne and Mr. Hedges. So far as I could see, it stunned the pair of them. Neither of them made the slightest attempt to return the ball. "Run it out!" cried Mr. Benyon. He and Mr. Barker began to run. They ran 4, and then they ran 2 more, and still the ball was not thrown in. Mr. Benyon urged the fielders on. "Hurry up, Bill Hedges!" Mr. Hedges did not hurry up. He never could have hurried up, even if his manner of fielding the ball had not wholly deprived him of his wind. But the ball was at last thrown in, when the pair had run 11. 41 runs off his first over was a result calculated to take the conceit out of the average bowler, and Mr. Benyon's last performance, his snick, had placed him at the other wicket, prepared to receive Mr. Sapsworth bowling when it came. "Now, Bob Sapsworth, I'll have a smack at you," he said. He had. I felt for Mr. Sapsworth, but since I had suffered it was only fair that he should suffer too. Crack, smack, whack went the balls out of sight in all directions, and for each ball that disappeared Mr. Benyon produced another from his breeches pocket. I felt that these things must be happening to me in a dream. I was rapidly approaching the condition in which Alice must have been in Wonderland, prepared for anything. Time went on. Mr. Sapsworth and I bowled over after over. Mr. Benyon was making a record in tall scoring. No performance of W.G.'s ever came within many miles of it. And the balls he lost, and the balls which he produced, and the diabolical ingenuity with which he managed, at the close of every over, to change his end! If Mr. Barker did no hitting, he did some running. He never had a chance to make a stroke, but his partner took care to make him run an incredibly large odd number as a wind-up to every over. Mr. Benyon did not seem to be distressed by the exertion in the least. Mr. Barker emphatically did. Mr. Benyon had buoyed us up by his statement that he would soon have to go. His ideas of soon were different from ours. I suppose at the outside our innings had lasted half an hour. How long we bowled to Mr. Benyon is more than I can say. I know that I bowled until I felt that I should either have to stop or drop. By degrees one fact began to be impressed upon me. It was this, that the number of spectators was growing smaller by degrees and beautifully less. Originally there had been quite a crowd assembled. In course of time this had dwindled to half a dozen stragglers. A little later on even these had gone, and not only spectators but cricketers had disappeared. If my eyes did not deceive me, there was not a member of the Latchmere team left on the ground. They had had enough of Mr. Benyon, or his ghost. What was more, some of our own team took courage, and leg bail. I caught one of them, the lad Fenning, in the act of scrambling through the hedge, but I had not the heart to stop him. I only wished that I had been so fortunate as to have led the van. The thing grew serious. So far as I could see, Mr. Hawthorne, Mr. Hedges, Mr. Sapsworth, and I were the only members of the Storwell team left on the ground, and the reflection involuntarily crossed my mind. What fools we were to stay! The amount of running about we had to do, and the way in which Mr. Benyon urged us on! The perspiration was running off from us in streams. I had never had such a sweater before. "I do like your kind of bowling, mister," Mr. Benyon would constantly remark. If I had had an equal admiration for his kind of batting, we should have been quits, but I had not, at least not then. A little later, looking round the field, I found that Mr. Hawthorne had disappeared, and that Mr. Hedges, stuck in a hedge, was struggling gallantly to reach safety on the other side. It was the last ball of Mr. Sapsworth over. Mr. Benyon ran 13 for a hit to leg. He made Mr. Barker run them too. It was the proverbial last straw. As Mr. Barker was running the 13th run, instead of going to his wicket he dropped his bat, the bat which he had never had a chance to utilize, and bolted off the field as though Satan was behind him. Mr. Benyon called out to him, but Mr. Barker neither stopped nor stayed. It seemed that the match was going to resolve itself into a game of single wicket. To make things better, when I came up to bowl I perceived that Mr. Sapsworth's power of endurance had reached its tether. The position he had taken up in the field had not much promise of usefulness. He first stood close up to the hedge, then he stood in the middle of the hedge, then, I doubt if he stood upon the other side, but at least he had vanished from my cane, and I was left alone to bowl to Mr. Benyon. That over! "I do like your kind of bowling, mister," he observed, when as usual he sent my first ball out of sight. "Never mind about the ball. I've got one in my pocket you can have." He had. He produced it, always from the same pocket. It was about the second thousand. "It does warm me so to swipe." This he said when he had sent my second ball on a journey to find his brother. Then a ball or two later on. "I call that a tidy smack." The smack in question had driven the ball, for anything I know to the contrary, a distance of some 5 miles or so. The next ball I fielded. It was the first piece of fielding I had done that day, and that was unintentional. It laid me on the ground. It was some moments before I recovered myself sufficiently to enable me to look round. When I did so no one was in sight. I was alone in the field. The opposite wicket was deserted. The bat lay on the ground, and Mr. Benyon had gone. The End. End of Chapter 3 of A Substitute. End of Amusement Only by Richard Marsh.